Chapter 578. It was truly unheard of for someone to choose to make a breakthrough in the midst of a disturbance. He couldn't afford to be distracted at all. Once he was distracted, the consequences would be irreversible. Even without the Samsara palace coming to claim his life, Jiang Xiu had already claimed his own life. He sat cross-legged on top of a roof. His long hair fluttered like flames on top of his head, and his clothes fluttered in the wind. He had the demeanor of an expert. Even in the face of certain death, he was so calm and composed. His bearing alone was enough to convince others. Many people gathered around Jiang Xiu, paying attention to this genius who had suddenly appeared. The royal family of Western Zhou had all come. They stood behind the railings of the distant attic, dressed in golden imperial robes. Behind them were civil officials and attendants. The people around them were all discussing. The content of their discussion was naturally about Jiang Xiu. Jiang Xiu took out a tightly sealed porcelain bottle. After opening it, the baleful aura of the true netherworld water slowly seeped out. It was dark purple in color and emitted a bone-chilling coldness. This is... The cold air spread out. Even the tiles of the roof under Jiang Xiu were crackling as if they were frozen by frost. White smoke rose from the air. It's so cold. Even from a mile away, they could feel the surrounding temperature drop extremely quickly. State Preceptor, could this be the true netherworld water? It should be. An old man in white beside the young man in the imperial robes nodded in agreement. However, his face revealed an extremely shocked expression. Could it be that he wants to break through to the great divine realm now? Jiang Xiu wasn't injured just now, and he even used such a precious item. There seemed to be no other possibility except for a breakthrough. Isn't the true netherworld water highly toxic? It can still be broken through? The state preceptor said, Crown Prince, you may not know, but it was recorded in Western Zhou's grand ceremony that the true netherworld water can be dispelled with the blood of the earth dragon fire snake. Using the true netherworld water to temper the immortal body, and then using the earth dragon fire snake to dispel it, one can be reborn. There have been many people who used this method to break through to the great divine realm. The Crown Prince said, Jiang Xiu also has the earth dragon fire snake? Earth dragon fire snakes were notoriously rare. If I'm not mistaken, it should be. After Jiang Xiu furrowed his brows, he gulped down the true netherworld water in one gulp. Everyone who saw this scene couldn't help but gasp. The true netherworld water's poison was extremely strong, and its evil aura was extremely cold. Just a little bit of it was enough to take one's life. One could imagine how Jiang Xiu felt at this moment. At the next moment, Jiang Xiu's marble, resolute, handsome, and impeccable face was suddenly suffused with a purplish-green light. His expression was contorted in pain. Many people had endured the cold before. On a rainy winter day, if the wind blew, Jiang Xiu only needed to stretch his hand out of the window to feel the wind and rain on his hand like knives. He felt as if countless knives were scraping his body, and even his bones were frozen. When a person froze to death in a world of ice and snow, they definitely wouldn't wrap themselves up tightly. Instead, they would take off their clothes. It was said that when a person was about to freeze to death, their entire body would heat up. This was the reaction of a person's ability to use heat to resist the cold. At that time, the person would already be delirious. When they felt the heat, they would begin to take off their clothes. Therefore, people who froze to death would usually leave their clothes open, or even completely naked. At this moment, Jiang Xiu's divine body was also reacting, and his divine body was constantly resisting the strange cold and poison. His entire body emitted wisps of dark green killing intent, and his entire face was already dark green. He looked abnormally terrifying, and the veins on the back of his hand bulged out like ferocious black worms. Soon, his entire body was trembling, and a low and painful sound came from his nostrils. The true netherworld water is a slow-acting poison, and it will slowly take effect. However, after drinking so much in one go, the slow-acting poison will become highly toxic. If he can't withstand it, he will die. The state preceptor said. The Western Zhou Crown Prince looked at Jiang Xiu and said, State Preceptor, do you think he can withstand it? The state preceptor shook his head. Breaking through to the great heaven god realm isn't something that can be done in a day. It needs several months of effort, but the current situation doesn't allow him to take the conventional route. He can only take the risk out of desperation, and the chances of success are very small. Even if he really is a genius, even if he can succeed and break through to the great heaven god realm that countless people look up to, not to mention the fact that he has just broken through to the great heaven god realm, he will not only have to face great heaven immortals, but also Fention, who is ranked 3rd on the assassin ranking. He raised his head and looked at the sky. He definitely won't be able to survive the night. The Western Zhou Crown Prince's expression was a little gloomy. People would always sympathize with the weak, and at this moment, Zhang Xiu was the weak, so he was the target of sympathy. The Western Zhou Crown Prince also hoped that there would be a miracle and let this arrogant person in front of him live, but in his heart, he knew that the chances were too slim. There was a loud boom. A layer of light screen suddenly burst out from Zhang Xiu's body, shattering the dark purple light on the surface of his body inch by inch. The huge explosive force directly tore it apart. Boom, boom. Such sounds came in an endless stream, and everyone noticed that Zhang Xiu's body was trembling non-stop. Every time he trembled, it was as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was caving in. It turned into a shockwave that constantly spread out in all directions. What kind of secret technique is this? The state preceptor shook his head and fell into deep thought. The Qianqing school had countless secret techniques. After all, it was a large sect and had been passed down for hundreds of thousands of years. Its heritage was not comparable to that of an ordinary sect. Zhang Xiu was once the head of a sect, so he could practice all the techniques learned in the Qianqing school. Moreover, he was a cultivation maniac and was very interested in all kinds of secret techniques. In addition to the people here who were paying attention to Zhang Xiu, there were many others who were also paying attention. The noise in the market was endless. At this moment, Zhang Xiu could not afford to be distracted. Once he made a mistake, he would be doomed eternally. In addition, if someone deliberately interfered with him in the market, Zhang Xiu would not be as lucky as last time. However, it seemed that no one would deliberately kill Zhang Xiu. If they did so in public and were found out, they would definitely be beaten up. In any case, Zhang Xiu was also a disciple of the Qianqing school. The Samsara Palace was not afraid, but they were very scary. Who would be willing to provoke the Qianqing school? Even the royal family of the Western Zhou Kingdom did not have the guts to do so. Although Zhang Xiu was in great pain, there was nothing wrong with him. Slowly, things seemed to calm down, but everyone knew that this was the calm before the storm. Time flew, and a few hours passed in the blink of an eye. The sun had just risen and was about to rise to the sky. This was the warmest time of the day, but the people present did not feel warm. They only felt extremely cold. How long can he hold on? The state preceptor said, "He can't hold on any longer. He can't hold on any longer." At this moment, everyone noticed that Zhang Xiu's purplish face was not only hideous, but his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose were all bleeding. The blood was unusually thick and stuck to his face, making him look even more terrifying. He looked like a dead man. This boy's perseverance is really amazing. Even a divine realm expert would not be able to endure so much true netherworld water. He must take the antidote immediately. He has to hold on until now. The Western Zhou Crown Prince said, "He won't die, will he?" Hearing this, everyone's faces darkened. Many people tried to hold on when breaking through the realm, but in the end, they overdid it and died. This situation could be found everywhere. Many times, when the disciples opened the door, they saw their master bleeding from the 7 orifices. They had been dead for a long time, and many people were crying. This, swallowing so much true netherworld water in one go, was a forced act. It was reasonable that he would die. But everyone felt that it was a pity and left just like that. However, the motionless Zhang Xiu suddenly opened his eyes, startling everyone. He quickly opened another sealed porcelain bottle and did not care about anything else. He knew that this might be even more terrifying than the true netherworld water, but he still poured it into his mouth without hesitation. He could live a little longer if he drank it. If he did not drink it, he would be covered up. He's alive. After swallowing the scorching hot blood of the earth dragon fire snake, the pain was even worse than before. He covered his face in pain. What was more frightening was that he felt two incomparably powerful forces approaching the continent of Western Zhou at an alarming speed. The people of the Samsara Palace were here. They were finally here. They came faster than Zhang Xiu expected. Everyone was shocked. At such a critical moment of life and death, the assassins had arrived. Chapter 579. Everyone present sighed. What was destined to happen had finally happened. The sad thing was that Zhang Xiu was still struggling bitterly, but in the end, he didn't even have the chance to pick up a weapon. With the speed of great celestial immortals and immortal kings, once their auras entered the range of their senses, they would arrive in an instant. In the next second, 2 streaks of light had already flashed and arrived. He's here. Everyone's gaze froze. Among the top assassins of the Reincarnation Palace, there was even an immortal king Fentian among them. It was very easy to identify. Great celestial immortal Wan Yunfei condensed a pair of light wings on his back, then the middle-aged man in front of him should be immortal king Fentian. Everyone's gaze immediately gathered on him. Many of the people present had never even seen an immortal king before. He had a medium build, and his clothes were as white as snow. His appearance was ordinary, and he looked like an ordinary mortal. Didn't the old saying say that the most outstanding assassin was thrown into a crowd? You definitely wouldn't notice him. It was definitely hard to imagine that such an ordinary man was actually Fentian from the Reincarnation Palace. His gaze swept towards Zhang Xiu, and a slight sound of suspicion came from his nostrils. He really didn't expect that Zhang Xiu would actually sit here and break through. Great heavenly immortal Wan Yunfei harumphed coldly. He was extremely disdainful of this, but more than that, he was displeased. Naive. Who do you think you are? How dare you use the threat of death to stimulate yourself to break through to the great celestial immortal realm? Ridiculous. Do you think anyone can break through to the great celestial immortal realm? Many people were stuck in front of the door of Grand Heaven Immortal Realm for over 1,000 years, or even several thousand years. In fact, most of them, even famous geniuses, were stuck in front of the door of Grand Heaven Immortal Realm. In order to become a great heaven immortal, the biggest problem was to comprehend a complete heavenly Tao. It was extremely difficult to figure out a complete heavenly Tao from the mysterious and unfathomable great Tao of gold core, especially when one would be hindered by the force of the sky towards the end. If one did not have enough fortune and innate talent, one would never be able to take the step that could seize the fortune of heaven and earth. What they didn't know was that Zhang Xiu had already obtained the complete heavenly Tao law. Ordinary immortal cultivators couldn't take that step because they couldn't integrate the law. However, Zhang Xiu was already at the great circle of heavenly wind. Instead, it was his body that restrained him. As long as his body met the requirements, he would break through to the great heavenly deity realm. After the earth dragon fire snake's blood entered his body, the scorching hot blood began to emit the effects of snake blood. His entire body began to heat up, and at the same time, the snake blood began to invade his natal divine artifact. Zhang Xiu, let's see where you can escape to this time. Zhang Xiu, who was in the middle of cultivation, suddenly opened his eyes and began to fight. However, his appearance was still as ferocious as before. His eyes contained a terrifying cold light. Escape? If I wanted to escape, would I still be here waiting for you? I'll be waiting here for you to die. How dare you? As a great celestial immortal, Wan Yunfei thought that he could easily crush an opponent who was far weaker than him. Who would have thought that he would be able to escape? This matter caused his face to hit rock bottom. He was ridiculed by his fellow sect members and scolded by them. His heart was filled with anger. Let me send you on your way. The light wings behind him suddenly flapped. Immediately, countless golden runes floated up from the surface of his body. At the same time, the shadow of a giant that was nearly 100 feet tall silently appeared behind him. Although this giant shadow was blurry and only had a rough outline, one could vaguely see that it was ferocious and terrifying. Its aura was extremely frightening. Wan Yunfei made a hand seal with one hand and shouted loudly. An immortal technique came out of his mouth. The giant behind him immediately raised its hand and slapped towards Zhang Xiu. Zhang Xiu felt the shadow above his head envelop him. The shadow of a palm that was at least 30 miles long appeared amidst the rolling runes. It pressed down on him bit by bit. The surrounding air was unable to bear the pressure and began to buzz. Last time, Wan Yunfei attacked by himself. This time, he used an immortal technique to condense a giant. The giant's attack was 100 times more powerful. Zhang Xiu felt that he could not avoid it. At the same time, a huge force pressed down on Zhang Xiu's hand. In almost an instant, Zhang Xiu could not move at all. Last time, Zhang Xiu used an escape technique to escape. This time, Wan Yunfei came prepared and did not give him the slightest chance. Zhang Xiu's face was unusually cold. He knew that if he did not fight with all his might, he would definitely die at this moment. The snake blood in his body had already begun to act up. After the cold, the intense heat caused his divine body to almost collapse. He immediately roared and the power in his body burst forth. At the same time, he suddenly took a step forward. This step was so fast that it was like a flash. His entire body immediately dissipated and turned into a hurricane that rushed forward. Boom! Zhang Xiu seemed very small under the giant palm. However, in the instant he rushed forward, the collision between the two of them caused the space to become blurry. At the same time, an extremely ear-piercing whistling sound rang out. Rings of air waves violently swept out in all directions. Wan Yunfei was greatly shocked. In this exchange, he actually felt that Zhang Xiu's power was not completely suppressed by him, a great celestial immortal. Although he was indeed slightly stronger than Zhang Xiu, they were still in the same realm. This is the power of the great perfection stage? Not to mention Wan Yunfei, even the immortal King Fentian at the side was extremely shocked. There was actually someone who had already cultivated the great Tao to the great perfection stage of the profound mysteries of a certain great Tao. However, he was not a great celestial immortal. Roar! Zhang Xiu roared loudly as if he had gone mad. His angry hair flew up like flames, his clothes fluttered, and his hands danced wildly. He seemed to be in extreme pain and also seemed to be in extreme anger. Roar, roar, roar. Shocking roars like that of a wild beast came out of his mouth. The people outside the arena were all shocked when they heard this. Roar. As the roar reached its peak, the hurricane also reached its peak. The power of his entire body seemed to have nowhere to go and exploded. A beam of light descended from the sky. Divine light descending from the heavens. He made a breakthrough, he made a breakthrough. The Crown Prince of Western Zhou cried out in excitement. Hearing the Crown Prince's cry, everyone else followed suit. Everyone present had never crossed paths with Zhang Xiu before, but at this moment, they were so excited that their blood was boiling. This was because they had witnessed a miracle in history. He actually did it. The state preceptor was dumbstruck. In just a few hours, he had actually broken through to the great celestial immortal realm. This was too unbelievable. This was something that had never happened before, but it had really happened in front of him. He really did it. Wan Yunfei's face was full of shock. He widened his eyes and tried hard to see the situation inside the divine light descending from the heavens. However, he could not see anything at all. However, in the next moment, there was another sound. The divine light descending from the heavens exploded. Within the strong light, there was an incomparably terrifying power that swept out. Wan Yunfei let out a muffled sound. His entire body trembled, and more than half of the golden talismans on the surface of his body immediately dissipated. The shadow of the giant behind him immediately became blurry and was on the verge of collapse. How is this possible? Wan Yunfei's expression was as if he had seen a ghost. Zhang Xiu's power had suddenly skyrocketed. Not only had he reached the level of a great celestial immortal, but he was even stronger than him. In the next moment, the divine light descending from the heavens exploded completely. A cold light flashed from within, and a long silver saber shot out. Fast, too fast. The great perfection of the wind element was almost at the pinnacle of speed. Crack! A silver light appeared on Wan Yunfei's neck. His skin was very white, and every pore on his neck was emitting a golden light. The moment his head was cut open, the golden light inside completely burst out. At this moment, the hurricane suddenly exploded. Jiang Xiu rushed out from inside with a saber art. His face was extremely cold, and he looked like a stone bodhisattva in a temple. At that moment, the stimulation of the snake blood had finally allowed his body to undergo a complete transformation. Especially Jun Yunfei's attack, which had almost killed him. At the moment of life and death, he had erupted with all his potential and forcefully broke through the bottleneck of the realm. The divine light descending from the heavens had succeeded in one go. At the same time, his entire body was still undergoing a huge transformation. He had advanced from a heavenly god to a great celestial immortal. This could be said to be a huge leap across races. His entire divine body had undergone another earth-shattering transformation. His appearance had changed once again. Of course, it was becoming more and more perfect. It was so perfect that it was difficult to describe it. Previously, he already felt that it was very good, and there was almost nothing to nitpick about. However, after the evolution, he felt that his previous body was trash. Chapter 580. He won. The people present had no time to react at all. Everything happened too suddenly, and life and death were determined in an instant. Jiang Xiu had advanced into the great heavenly god realm and was at the same level as Wan Yunfei. He indeed had the ability to kill him, so it was not strange for him to kill the other. However, seeing Jiang Xiu succeed, the people present felt a burst of excitement in their hearts. It was as if they were the ones who had defeated Wan Yunfei. Even the pores on their bodies opened up. They had unknowingly stood on Jiang Xiu's side. Good job! The Crown Prince of Western Zhou shouted excitedly. The imperial advisor at the side also revealed a joyful expression. Jiang Xiu had broken through at the last moment, so he also hoped that Jiang Xiu could create another glorious scene. However, the decapitated head strangely did not fall. Instead, it rushed toward Jiang Xiu and opened its mouth, spitting out a series of strange runes. These runes only made a whirling sound and strangely condensed into a small sword, emitting a sword cry. Although the light was dim, it gave people a feeling that it was indestructible. Jiang Xiu's expression changed greatly. He felt an extremely subtle but extremely terrifying power on the small sword. He quickly turned his head to look, and sure enough, Fen Tian was casting a technique. Wan Yunfei was already dead. Jiang Xiu could clearly feel that he had the upper hand in terms of power from that slash just now. After his cultivation level was equal to Wan Yunfei's, his power was no longer inferior. In addition, the power of his natal divine weapon had destroyed Wan Yunfei's defense and at the same time harvested his vitality. Although it was only a slash across his throat, when the saber chi entered his entire body was completely destroyed by the saber chi. He was already dead to the point that he could not be any more dead. However, when the immortal King Profound Technique saw his subordinate being killed, he did not make a move because he did not want to be gossiped about. After all, this was a public killing. He had the pride of an immortal king. However, when Wan Yunfei was killed, he wanted to secretly get back at him, so he used Jun Yunfei's corpse. This technique was really ingenious. He could actually control the corpse. Controlling corpses was very rare, especially in the Qing prefecture. This kind of evil method was almost never seen. However, it was not difficult to understand why an assassin could control corpses, let alone an expert who had reached the level of an immortal king. The power of the small sword was the power of a celestial king. Jiang Xiu had become a great celestial god in a heaven-defying manner, but he was definitely not a match for a celestial king. He still only needed the power of a single finger to destroy Jiang Xiu. There was simply no way to resist. At this moment, Wan Yunfei's originally closed eyes suddenly opened. He even let out an eerie laugh, which was extremely frightening. "Don't you have a mystical escape technique? I let you slip away last time. I would like to see it again." The fire evasion heavenly technique was indeed a top-notch evasion technique. However, in front of a celestial king, even if he had already reached the level of great heavenly deity, he would only be able to use it for a short period of time. Most likely, he would be caught up in an instant. Even if a celestial king-level evasion technique was a top-notch one, when facing a celestial king, he, a newly advanced great heavenly deity, was really displaying his slight skill before an expert. The difference between an immortal king and a great celestial immortal was like the difference between a king and a commoner. There was no hope of winning. "Alright, since you want to see it, I'll let you see it." Jiang Xiu's eyes burst out with an incomparably arrogant cold light. Even if he was going to die in battle, he would never let go of his arrogance that made people's hair stand on end. Because he was Zhang Luoxia. His hands quickly formed hand seals as he continuously spat out incantations. Hong! The first sound of heaven and earth resounded throughout the world, causing the clouds in the cloudless sky to churn and thunder to burst out. At the same time, the rising sun rose from the coastline at a speed visible to the naked eye. A natural phenomenon. Fon Tian's ordinary face revealed a look of surprise. It was not rare to trigger a natural phenomenon. Many people and many secret techniques could trigger it, especially the Protoss, a race that was blessed by heaven and earth. However, he had never heard of a second sun rising from heaven and earth. What was even more shocking was that at the same time, a strange power spread over. Fon Tian's expression changed, and suddenly, a strange light flashed in his eyes. This was an eye technique, and under his eye technique, he could clearly see that when this strange power spread out, the color of the originally colorful world had an obvious deviation. It was actually a brand new world that enveloped this part of the world. Every world had its own structure, and there were some differences. Fon Tian cried out involuntarily, "World law!" This time, he finally understood that the external Six Directions secret art that he used on Jiang Xiu would be dodged by Jiang Xiu. No matter how hard he tried, he could not hit him because they were in different worlds. How could he hit him when they were separated by a world? However, in a face-to-face situation, it was not the external Six Directions secret art. Jiang Xiu could not dodge his attack. "I didn't expect that you actually comprehended the world law." To be able to comprehend the time law or the space law was already an extremely terrifying existence. However, Jiang Xiu not only comprehended the time law and the space law together, he even fused them into the world law. "If that's the case, then I'll use my tyrannical strength to crush you directly." Fon Tian's relaxed expression disappeared. Jiang Xiu had to die. If this person did not die, if he were to grow up one day and reach the Divine King level, then it would be a disaster for his reincarnation palace. Ha! Jiang Xiu howled in madness. Since there was no way to evade, the long saber in his hands slashed downwards with all his might. Sadly, his body had yet to recover to its peak condition, and he didn't even have the chance to glance at the third divine inscription diagram. What was the third innate ability of the divine race? He had no way to unleash its full potential. "You want to crush me with your tyrannical strength?" Wishful thinking. Ding! The blade and sword collided. The incomparably terrifying power of an immortal king surged out from the small sword. Jiang Xiu could be said to have used all his strength in this slash. After slashing out, his entire body was extremely sore. Facing the support of the immortal king's power, he was unable to resist at all. Bang! Bang! A crack appeared on the tip of the blade. Then, a second and third crack appeared. The cracking sounds became louder and louder. The cracks quickly extended from the tip of the blade to the entire blade. The blade was densely covered with fine cracks, and no one could find a complete one. Umph! Fon Tian let out a cold snort. Although he was disdainful, he was slightly surprised. Under the attack of an immortal king, although he did not use much strength, Jiang Xiu, as a great heavenly god, was actually able to block it slightly. This was enough to shock the world. Fon Tian activated his hand seals and added a little more strength. Bang! The natal long blade could no longer withstand the destructive power of the immortal king. With a sound, it shattered, turning into countless fine fragments that scattered in all directions. Jiang Xiu opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale. His natal divine weapon was destroyed. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and his hands quickly formed one talisman after another. At the same time, he clapped his hands together, and after a flash of light, a giant wind blade that was several feet long was formed. With a surge of magic power in his hands, it suddenly disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was already shooting out like a cutting knife. "You're on your deathbed. Even your natal divine weapon has been destroyed by me. What else do you have to fight me with?" Facing the sharp wind blade, Fan Tian only smiled. The wind blade emitted a sharp light, but after he casually pinched a rune, he waved his sleeve, and a strong golden wind blew out. Bang! The two forces collided with a loud bang. There was a huge difference in the quality of their power. Even though Jiang Xiu's great Tao of Wind had reached perfection and had reached the greatest power of the wind, the power of an immortal king was above the heavenly wind. Under such circumstances, the wind blade shattered like glass. Die! With a whoosh, the small sword shot toward Jiang Xiu. This time, Jiang Xiu could no longer dodge. Even if he could, there was nothing he could do. His natal divine weapon was already damaged, and his injuries were too serious. It was not enough to support him to use the fire evasion heavenly technique again. Moreover, even if he used it, Fan Tian would be able to catch up in an instant. It's over. It's all over. Life is brilliant, death is dazzling. To be able to break through, kill a great celestial immortal, and even force an immortal king to this extent, it's worth it. The state preceptor of the Western Zhou kingdom exclaimed from the bottom of his heart. He could clearly see the situation of the battle. What a pity! What a pity! The prince of Western Zhou was filled with regret. However, at this moment, an incomparably fast light shot over from the distant horizon. It's a sword. It's so fast that I can't see it clearly. Chapter 581. If time and space could be lengthened, perhaps one would be able to see a sword light with incomparably terrifying speed and power, streaking across the vast sky for dozens of miles. It arrived in an instant and accurately collided with the small sword. Ding! The same crisp sound rang out, but after the small sword was sent flying, it lasted for a few seconds before a loud explosion erupted from within. It was like a collision of nuclear weapons. One could imagine how terrifying the power was. The small sword was completely distorted by the collision. After being bent to the extreme, it could not bear the heavy burden and directly shattered into runes. Then, it was crushed into gravel by the power of the incoming sword and finally disappeared without a trace. This moment was too fast. From the appearance of the flying sword to Fan Tian's attack, it only took a thought or even more. Many people did not even have time to react before they saw the small sword that forced Jiang Xiu into a dead end explode. A dark long sword was inserted into the ground in front of Jiang Xiu. Half of the sword was inserted into the ground. The sword was incomparably huge, taller than Jiang Xiu and wider than Jiang Xiu. It could almost cover his entire body. The sword exuded a black aura and was engraved with ancient talismans. They seemed to be mottled and filled with some kind of ancient mystery that was difficult to uncover. What sword is this? The crown prince of Western Zhou and the people who witnessed everything exclaimed. To be able to defeat the sword of an immortal king, the person who came must be an immortal king. It's Hei Kei! The state preceptor shouted excitedly. Hei Kei! Whoa, this was simply going to blow up. The famed sword that ranks at the top of the sword ranking, Hei Kei? Fan Tian's expression changed drastically and became serious. He could feel the power of the opponent's sword more directly. Compared to the owner of this black sword, his reputation was far inferior. Because he was the retrograde leaf of the bitter realm. The top genius on the sword ranking. The retrograde leaf of the bitter realm of the sword ranking is here? The famed sword on the sword ranking was famous, and so was the person. Moreover, he was the master of the bitter realm. Fon Tion's eyes were unsettled. If he really waited for others to arrive, then he would not have the slightest bit of confidence in killing Zhang Xiu under his nose. Zhang Xiu was not unfamiliar with this sword at all. He almost became the owner of this sword, but in the end, he returned the sword to its rightful owner and saved the retrograde leaf. Back then, she had saved his life. Now, he was here to repay her kindness? It doesn't matter who comes. The light on Fon Tion's body circulated for a while, his figure blurred, and suddenly flashed. He brandished his sword, and a cold smile appeared on his face. He wanted to kill Zhang Xiu before the retrograde leaf arrived. When the immortal king attacked, the sky was immediately filled with whistling sounds. Countless grains of sand and gravel were floating in the air. Not far away, Zhang Xiu's natal divine artifact was destroyed and he was seriously injured. He had no strength to fight at all. Buzz, buzz, the gigantic black fault sword that was stabbed into the ground began to shake violently, emitting waves of sound waves. After the sound of the sword rang out, it rose from the ground with a whoosh. Noisy. Fon Tion's face was filled with hostility. He poured all the mana in his body into the treasure sword in his hand. Immediately, the sword flashed and swept out, heavily striking the black fault sword. There was a loud ding sound. The black fault sword was not just a divine weapon like what outsiders knew. It had long been refined into a natal artifact by the retrograde leaf. He had never thought of passing down this divine weapon on the sword ranking to his descendants. If not for this, he would have been killed by his traitorous disciple, Di Chongqing. Fon Tian was unable to send the black fault sword flying with one strike. His eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. He immediately stabbed forward, and with a whirling sound, he once again stabbed the black fault sword. Zhang Xiu had almost no strength to fight back. He did not need to directly attack Zhang Xiu. Indirectly, as long as his power touched Zhang Xiu, he could completely destroy him. Ha! Fon Tian roared angrily and poured all the mana in his body into his treasure sword. He pushed the black fault sword towards Zhang Xiu, but his intention was to let the retrograde leaf obtain it. The other party also forcefully withstood it. Boom, boom, boom. Under this confrontation, the power of the immortal king burst forth, and everything in the surroundings exploded. The onlookers were so frightened that they hurriedly fled. Under the power of the immortal king, they were no different from the surrounding houses and trees. They would die if they touched it. The retrograde leaf's voice sounded in the sky. Little friend, hide behind the black fault sword. This voice seemed to come from ancient times and was filled with a sense of vastness. In fact, before he could speak, Zhang Xiu had already hidden behind the black fault sword instead of retreating. Using the black fault sword as a shield, he blocked the power of the immortal king that was surging towards him. If Zhang Xiu did not even have this judgment, he would definitely not have become Zhang Luoxia. He would have been killed when he was still a young boy. And when Zhang Xiu approached the black fault sword, it actually expanded once again. All the flowing light of the power dissipated from the two sides of the black fault sword. Legend has it that the ancient lunar black gold had 3 forms. When Zhang Xiu first saw the black fault sword, he felt that the material was somewhat similar. Now that it had expanded, Zhang Xiu could basically confirm that this material should be the ancient lunar black gold. The first form was the smallest, but it was the fastest and sharpest, but its power was slightly weaker. The second form was in the middle, and its speed and power were also in the middle, which was its current state. The third form had not been seen yet, but according to the characteristics of the lunar black gold, it should be the slowest, but its power should be the strongest, and its size should also be the largest. From the current situation, the largest size could block the power of the immortal king from spreading to Zhang Xiu. It could be seen that the bitter realm retrograde leaf still had some strength left to deal with Fon Tian. Zhang Xiu's face did not have the slightest hint of panic, not even a hint of nervousness could be seen. He had long been indifferent. When he killed the first person, he had a feeling that sooner or later, he would also die in the hands of others. Therefore, he had already seen through life and death. What he fought for was who was superior, and what he fought for was his name. Life was brilliant, death was dazzling. This was the attitude of immortal martial cultivators. However, he definitely did not think that he would die in the hands of Fontion. But he did not expect that the one who came to save him was the retrograde leaf who was far away in the bitter realm. He probably flew all the way here without stopping for a day. Die! Fontion let out a fierce roar, his left hand holding onto the sword, both hands holding onto the sword. All the mana in his body exploded out, the chi behind him exploded out, just like the recoil of a sprayer. It rushed out and extended for a full mile. The eaves and streets behind him seemed to have been cut open. Break for me! No one who wanted to kill the people of the Reincarnation Palace had ever been able to survive. Never. Buzz buzz, the Black Tower greatsword was forced back a meter and began to tremble. At the same time, it flashed with a black light that was incomparably dazzling. Ha! A loud shout came from the horizon, and in the sky, a person could be seen riding on the wind under his feet rapidly pushing him forward. Suddenly, his entire person flashed again, and with a whoosh, he appeared behind the Black Fault greatsword, abruptly slamming his palm onto the body of the Black Fault greatsword, and with his palm, the Black Fault greatsword's momentum of retreat was instantly halted. The person's drooping hair was suddenly blown up by the wind, and his eyes were filled with a raging fighting spirit. Bitter Realm Retrograde Leaf. He's here, he finally made it. Ha ha ha. The Bitter Realm Retrograde Leaf laughed out loud. He was laughing at the opponent's incompetence, and was also happy that he was able to make it in time to save Jiang Xiu. He stared at Jiang Xiu with bright eyes. Are you all right? Jiang Xiu could only say that he was fine. He couldn't say that he was miserable. He was being chased by someone, and even his natal relic was broken. That would be a loss of elegance. One shouldn't mess up one's hair when acting tough. He shook his head. Why are you here? The Bitter Realm Retrograde Leaf said, what others did to my retrograde leaf, my retrograde leaf will pay them back tenfold. Hatred is like that, kindness is also like that. The next time you meet me, I will come again until I have paid it all back. Jiang Xiu said, I won't give you such a chance. The Bitter Realm Retrograde Leaf was stunned for a moment, but he quickly understood the meaning behind Jiang Xiu's words. He wasn't rejecting his good intentions, but he was confident that he wouldn't fall into such a hopeless situation again. Ha ha ha. Immediately, he raised his head and laughed out loud. Then, his eyes fell on Jiang Xiu, and his eyes became brighter and brighter. Heavens, I can tell that you are extraordinary with one look. You are indeed a genius. How long has it been, and you have actually become a great heaven god? Bastard! When had Fontion, who was on the opposite side, been looked down upon like this? We are still in a life and death battle here, and you guys are actually chatting. Do you even take me seriously? Let's chat later. Wait for me to take care of this guy. Chapter 582. The Bitter Retrograde Leaf's hand that was pressing on the Black Fault sword suddenly trembled and burst out with a bright rune light. The Black Fault sword that was stuck in the ground changed into layers of sword shadows. Phantom sword formation? Jiang Xiu smiled slightly. The Bitter Retrograde Leaf's methods were indeed extraordinary. He was able to form a sword formation with just a wave of his hand. The fake sword shadows were able to form a sword formation, and its power was multiplied in an instant. Ha! The Retrograde Leaf let out an angry roar. The power of the sword formation burst out and rumbled. The surrounding airflow could not withstand it and exploded. He exerted force in his hand and pushed the Black Fault greatsword again. Fontion's face darkened. He shook his wrist and the long sword once again changed into sword light. In a flash, more than 10,000 swords slashed on the Black Fault. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. The Retrograde Leaf's lips curled into a contemptuous smile. His eyes suddenly burst out with a terrifying light. His face withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not only did he look old, but his face also turned black. Destruction! The rune light on the sword suddenly lit up. An unprecedented power surged out, and the power of the Black Fault greatsword truly exploded at this moment. This power emitted a squeaking sound. It was very strange and had a hint of evil. Zhang Xiu was not unfamiliar with it. He had fought with the retrograde leaf before. This was the power of the Black Fault Greatsword. It was a very strange power of destruction. Its lethality was strange and powerful. There was almost nothing that could restrain it. The only way was to be stronger than it. However, from the looks of it, Fan Tian was inferior to the retrograde leaf. The retrograde leaf still had some leeway from the beginning to the end. Fan Tian had already used all his strength to kill Zhang Xiu. Such a scene caused Fan Tian's expression to stiffen. A trace of sternness flashed in his eyes. Both of his hands let go of the long sword that he was holding tightly. His fingers were constantly forming all kinds of strange hand seals like a wheel. However, under the power of the black wind, Fan Tian could feel the power in his body being taken away by the black wind, and his face became abnormally pale. The man wanted to fight back, but he soon realized that it was useless. The power that was taken away by the black wind had been converted into the power of the reverse leaf. With the difference in power, he could no longer fight back. His whole body was blown away along with his long sword. This was also the main reason for the retrograde leaf's name. It was able to absorb the mana of other people and use it for its own use. This was a power that extremely heaven-defying had cultivated in a bitter environment. Although it was only able to produce a single retrograde leaf after going through thousands of tortures, it was truly extraordinary when it attacked. Anyone who crossed paths with it would give it a thumbs up. Can't even withstand a single blow. Suddenly, retrograde leaf pulled out his sword and flew towards him in the black wind. His surroundings were filled with light, and his speed was astonishing. Humph! Fan Tian knew that it was time for him to fight with his life on the line. Without any hesitation, he extended his hand and the flying long sword once again fell into his hand. Countless golden runes danced in the air. He could only rely on his sword arts to defeat him. Sorrowful leaf crossing heaven. Retrograde leaf's figure flashed continuously in the sky. When the two of them clashed with their swords, the sword light flashed and overlapped. It was so fast that it left no trace. An ordinary person's eyesight would not be able to keep up with their speed. They could only see their figures and the sword light. The two of them were thrown far away, but they returned to the surface of the sea and returned to where they were just now. Fan Tian's expression became more and more unsightly. There were already a few sword wounds on his body, and fresh blood was flowing. Not only did he suffer from internal injuries, he was also completely suppressed in the contest of sword arts. A deafening sound that tore apart one's eardrums resounded. Heike heavily slid past the silver sword light and forcefully broke open a hole, piercing through the black mist. The light flashed past Fan Tian's body, but it did not seem to injure Fan Tian in the slightest. Only a faint black mark was left on his clothes, but in reality, his body had suffered an extremely great injury. Heike's injury could only be treated by 3 people in the Immortal Martial Academy. Zhang Xiu had treated Xue Lingyun once. However, it was definitely a difficult problem for Fan Tian. Bow down to this sovereign. Fan Tian had almost no chance of winning. Ever since the retrograde leaf appeared, he was completely at a disadvantage and could only struggle bitterly. It was not easy for a mortal king to kill a mortal king, and if he really wanted to escape, it would be very difficult to stop him. However, Fan Tian in front of him did not have any intention of escaping, even though he knew that he was no match for him. There had never been anyone who could not be killed in the Hall of Samsara. There was also no one who could not be killed by him, Fan Tian. And if he continued to fight with the retrograde leaf, the only outcome would be death. Let's end this. Suddenly, black chi surged up in the sky, enveloping Fan Tian within. Then, Heike slashed past at a speed that could not be captured by the naked eye or even divine sense. Fan Tian let out a difficult whimper, his face darkened and he did not move at all. Soul attack. The corner of Zhang Xiu's mouth twitched. In reality, when the retrograde leaf was fighting against the Fan Tian sword arts, he was sweating profusely. His heaven-crossing sorrowful leaf was indeed very powerful, but there was a flaw, and he was afraid that Fan Tian would find it. However, reality proved that a genius like him, Jiang Luoxia, was not easy to find. But now, the outcome had been decided. Have mercy. Following this shout, in the distant horizon, two figures hurried over. One of them threw out a halo of light with his right hand. The halo of light spun and flew out runes, and Fentian's body was enveloped in a layer of golden light. His body was also shaken and he took a step back. He frowned. Soul-type defensive artifact. In the immortal martial continent, anything related to the soul was a huge treasure. The Qianqing school only had a soul-type defensive artifact, the heavenly mirror. The rest were half-baked. At this moment, the two figures had already arrived. The one in the lead had a crown on his head and a golden brocade robe on his body. He had an extraordinary bearing, and he carried a noble aura. He kept the halo of light. From the beginning to the end, no one could clearly see what the soul-type defensive artifact in his hand looked like. Looking at the person's attire, his identity was already obvious. The number 1 assassin in the Hall of Samsara, Dong Wujuan. Beside him was another immortal king, the number 4 assassin in the Hall of Samsara, Lu Jiaoyang. Hall Master. Fan Tian's lonely face immediately regained its vigor. He was very excited. He had already lost all hope, but who would have thought that the immortal kings of the hall would come to his rescue? This was something that had never happened before. Why are you here? Dong Wujuan motioned for him to calm down, but his eyes were fixed on the retrograde leaf. Retrograde leaf of the bitter realm? The retrograde leaf's expression froze. Yes. Who would have thought that the Hall of Samsara would not only send out a great divine god and immortal king to kill a mere divine god, but also send out 2 immortal kings. 1 immortal king against 3 immortal kings. This was going to be troublesome. Dong Wujuan said, "Our Hall of Samsara wants to kill Zhang Xiu. Why is the master of the bitter realm interfering?" The retrograde leaf said, "Because he's my friend." Dong Wujuan laughed coldly. "Then what about now? Do you think you can still save him?" No one has ever been able to save the people that the Hall of Samsara wants to kill. This Dong Wujuan was very mysterious. Very few people had seen him fight, but everyone had a very high opinion of him. This was all because he came from that mysterious country. Some people said that he had inherited everything from that country's monarch, and was comparable to that country's monarch. Some people even thought that he was stronger than Jiang Luoxia. Jiang Luoxia's cultivation speed was the fastest, and he was very famous. He could be said to be the idol of the immortal martial arts. However, in terms of absolute strength, there was still a gap between him and that group of people. Of course, everyone believed that Jiang Luoxia would join that group of people sooner or later. It was precisely because of this type of stunning genius that he was able to create the legend of Luoxia 9 mysteries cleansing the heavens. Dong Wujuan was also considered to be close to that group of people, even closer than Zhang Xiu. He alone was enough to make the retrograde leaf afraid, not to mention that he had 2 helpers. Leave or die here? You choose? The retrograde leaf laughed out loud. You let me choose, so I choose. Wouldn't that be embarrassing? I won't leave here, and I won't die either. The retrograde leaf was also an overlord. How could it be easy to deal with him? You think you can fight against the 3 of us? The retrograde leaf raised black fault and said coldly, "How would you know if you don't try? You have to think carefully. If you go against the Hall of Samsara, you will become the target of my Hall of Samsara until you die." Before this, the Hall of Samsara's longest pursuit was the immortal king, but he didn't live for more than 13 days. Are you sure you won't regret it? Everyone fell silent. What a strong murderous aura. As expected of the Hall Master of the Hall of Samsara. The pressure was so oppressive that it made people unable to breathe. Stop talking nonsense. If you want to fight, let's fight. The retrograde leaf didn't regret it at all. Zhang Xiu said, "Retrograde leaf, there's no need to trouble you. The people who should be here are here." Suddenly, a large group of immortal kings rushed over from the distant horizon. This time it really blew up. What happened to the small western Zhou today? Did it become a gathering place for immortal kings? Chapter 583. Usually, it was an extravagant hope to meet an immortal king. Today, seeing 2 immortal kings was not enough. They were already extremely excited. Then, another 2 immortal kings came. Just as they arrived, another large group of immortal kings came. They saw the streams of light in the sky flying over, each faster than the other. The speed at which the immortal kings rushed over was definitely the same as the feeling of seeing private cars on the road suddenly seeing supercars on the track. It was a visual impact on a completely different level. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 celestial kings. It was an explosion, it was simply an explosion. The powerful aura that rushed over was simply suffocating. Who in the world could resist the joint forces of 4 celestial kings? Who are these 4 celestial kings? The crown prince of Western Zhou widened his eyes, and the shock in his heart could not be calmed down for a long time. One had to know that the patriarch of the Jialan prince's emperor was only a great celestial immortal. It was extremely rare to see a celestial king. 4 of them came at once. For the Western Zhou kingdom, it was extremely glorious. Retrograde Leaf looked at the 4 of them, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He smiled evilly. He knew who these people in front of him were. They were the elders of the Qianqing school. As a disciple of the Qianqing school, Zhang Xiu was openly pursued by the Reincarnation Palace. The Qianqing school was such a proud existence. How could they not save their own disciple? That's right, the people who should be here are here. As soon as these 4 celestial kings arrived, coupled with Retrograde Leaf, the situation suddenly took a huge turn. Zhang Xiu had 5 celestial kings on his side, while the Reincarnation Palace only had 3. No, Fan Tian was already half crippled. At most, he could only be considered half. 5 against 2.5, twice the number of people. Moreover, these elders of the Qianqing school were also very strong. They were also above average among the celestial kings. Q-Sword Elder, Law-Enforcing Elder, Xiaoye, and Lu Chongkong. Which one of them was not famous? Now, what should we do? Fan Tian finally knew that the Hall Master would bring another immortal king over. He must have received the news that the Qianqing school had interfered in this matter, and 4 immortal kings had come in one go. They had come in time, otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to escape even if he wanted to. But now, there was no chance of winning even if it was 5 against 3, and he was already seriously injured. Dong Wujuan was deep in thought. He could clearly see the current situation. Among the 4 elders of Qianqing school, the cultivation of Elder of Law Enforcement and Elder Q-Sword was not low. The other 2 were not to be underestimated either. With the addition of the bitter situation Retrograde Leaf, it could be said that if they fought, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. 1 or 2 of them might be able to escape, but some of them would definitely be killed. Especially Fan Tian, he was already heavily injured, and when facing the attacks of 5 immortal kings, the chances of him surviving were very low. Rationally, he escaped with Zhao Yang, who was beside him, and if the situation was worse, even Zhao Yang would be killed. Want to try? The 4 elders of the Celestial Motion sect tacitly took up positions in 4 directions. Their faces were filled with anger. How dare he bully the Celestial Motion sect? Was it because the Celestial Motion sect hadn't killed anyone for too long that any random Tom, Dick, or Harry dared to ride on our heads and shit on us? Retrograde Leaf, on the other hand, held his sword horizontally and looked at Dong Wujuan mockingly. This was the Hall Master of Reincarnation Palace, the number 1 expert on the assassin ranking. The latter's face was pale and somewhat ugly. He couldn't win, but for so many years, Reincarnation Palace had always killed without exception. Just now, he had solemnly vowed that the longest time an immortal king had been hunted down by Reincarnation Palace was only 13 days. Was he going to admit defeat now? Wasn't this a slap in the face? Hall Master, what should we do? Lu Zhaoyang asked softly. Fan Tian, who was at the side, also had an ugly expression. This time, they had really kicked aboard. In order to kill a mere divine realm expert, they had lost 2 people, one of whom was a great celestial immortal. Now, not only that, but the reputation of the entire reincarnation palace, including their lives, might also be lost. Dong Wujuan had never been in such a predicament since he dominated the immortal martial arts. It was all because of that person. In his heart, he wanted nothing more than to chop Jiang Xiu into minced meat and throw it into the sea to feed the fishes, but there was nothing he could do now. Elder Q-Sword looked at Dong Wujuan and sneered, "Do you think the disciples of Qianqing School are so easy to kill? Even if you can kill them, Qianqing School will make your reincarnation palace accompany them in death." Dong Wujuan's face alternated between green and white. In the current situation, who would lose face and who would be embarrassed? We're only in the business of killing people to earn money. Today we're doomed. Hall Master! Hall Master! Fon Tian and Lu Jiaoyang were extremely shocked. When had Reincarnation Palace ever lowered their stance? Not only them, but everyone else was in an uproar. Was Reincarnation Palace, who was known to kill without fail, planning to give up this time? Was Reincarnation Palace, who had never failed before, going to fail this time? The prestige that had been built up for thousands of years was bound to be destroyed in an instant. Everything was lost in one day. Dong Wujuan said, "There's no need to say more. At this time, this hall master has already decided to give up the pursuit of Jiang Xiu. From now on, I will never accept any orders from Qianqing School. Elders, are you satisfied with this?" He had never expected that even Fon Tian could not take down Jiang Xiu in the first place. Instead, he was saved by the retrograde leaf, causing him to miss the opportunity. If they had really killed him, according to the position of the Ji Dao sect, they would definitely suppress this matter and not let a war break out between Qianqing School and Reincarnation Palace. But it was too late to say anything now. Humph! A cold snort was heard. Jiang Xiu said, "Do you think the disciples of Qianqing School are so easy to bully? If you want to kill them, you can kill them. If you don't want to kill them, you can just leave?" The faces of the 4 Qianqing School elders were also filled with resentment. Qianqing School's sense of honor and superiority had always been very strong. They could not tolerate blasphemy, let alone bullying. Dong Wujuan gritted his teeth in hatred. A nobody like him had no right to speak here. But if Jiang Xiu dared to say that, then Reincarnation Palace would have to bear with it. Sure enough, the elder of law enforcement said, "That's right. If you just pat your butt and say that you don't want to kill them and leave, then in the future, everyone will dare to mess with our Qianqing School." Fon Tian and Lu Jiaoyang were so angry that their faces turned red. They felt that they had already made the biggest concession. They did not expect that the people of Qianqing School were still not satisfied. "How hateful!" Dong Wujuan asked, "What do you think, elder?" The elder of law enforcement turned his head and asked Jiang Xiu, "You are the victim. What do you think?" Jiang Xiu said, "Let Fon Tian leave his life behind." Hua! The crowd was in an uproar. What? The expressions of the 3 from Reincarnation Palace changed greatly, especially Fon Tian. This little ant actually wanted to force him to his death today. Just by himself? Wishful thinking. Whether it was wishful thinking or not, that was not certain. Retrograde Leaf said coldly, "Yes, let him leave his life behind." Retrograde Leaf also cared about his reputation. He had killed half of them and was about to succeed. If he were to let them save him, then he would lose face. The elder of law enforcement also echoed, "As long as you leave your lives behind, it's considered letting you off easy." Dong Wujuan's expression was very gloomy, while Fon Tian's face was incomparably pale. He looked at his own palace master. He was clear about the situation in front of him. If the other party insisted and did not hesitate to make a move, then he could only be executed. But he was unwilling. A dignified immortal king had actually fallen into the hands of a little heavenly god. And just a moment ago, if he had made a move at the first moment, then Jiang Xiu would have been dead, and then there would not have been anything else. "Palace Master, I..." Dong Wujuan raised his hand to stop him, then turned to look at the scene. Immortal kings were extremely rare strength in any place, and it was the same for Reincarnation Palace. Without Fan Tian, it was as if he had lost a hand. He said, "Elders, master of bitter situation, you have the advantage in numbers. We are indeed no match for you, but even a rabbit will bite when cornered. This palace master does not believe that each of you has a soul defense type artifact on you, but this palace master has one. Are you not afraid that this palace master will fight it out with you? Killing one is killing two is even, killing three is a big gain." Indeed, he had shown his soul defense type artifact the moment he appeared and saved Fan Tian. He must have also mastered soul attacks. If not, who would dare to resist? Then all of you should prepare to die here. Tianqing School was not something that could be intimidated by Dong Wujuan's few words. Soul attacks could not hurt them, and ordinary immortal martial artists were enough to kill them. The elders of Tianqing School had the confidence to do so. The atmosphere suddenly became tense again. There was no way the Heaven Motion sect would retreat. Suddenly, Dong Wujuan's figure flashed, and he actually rushed out of the encirclement of the immortal kings, charging towards Jiang Xiu. Not good. Chapter 584. Everyone present thought that Dong Wujuan would make a move, but no one thought that Dong Wujuan would make a move on Jiang Xiu. Was he abandoning his two subordinates? Jiang Xiu's life in exchange for the lives of two celestial kings. Did he think it was worth it? Perhaps he really did think it was worth it, because it was Jiang Xiu who had forced him to this step. All of this was caused by Jiang Xiu, and he could not take this lying down. In the current situation, Fan Tian had to die no matter what, and the reputation of the Reincarnation Palace would be affected as well. Since that was the case, even if another celestial king died, he had to kill Jiang Xiu to protect the reputation of the Reincarnation Palace. Be careful. Everything was too sudden, and Dong Wujuan's strength was indeed terrifyingly strong. There were so many celestial kings present, but no one could be faster than him. Jiang Xiu, if anyone dies, you'll die first. Dong Wujuan's pupils shrank, and a strange soul-like vortex formed in his eyes. It was boundless and silent. This was a power that was not bound by time or space. It was formless, and its origin was unknown. Soul attack. No matter what shape or how much power it had, as long as it could form power, it was enough to destroy a person's soul. Bastard. Retrograde leaf cursed. He was also filled with hatred. He came from afar to save Jiang Xiu and repay his kindness, but the other party was about to succeed right under his nose. Great hatred, great hatred. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. The black fault in his hand shrunk without hesitation, turning into a form that was slightly larger than a normal long sword. This was the first form of the ancient extreme Een black gold, and in this form, it was the fastest. With a whoosh, the sword light shot out, heading straight for Dong Wujuan. The elders of the Tianqing School were also caught off guard, and were furious. However, since he dared to provoke them, Elder Q Sword also shouted angrily, "Attack!" Xiao Ya's entire body emitted a faint incantation sound. He immediately used a curse technique. This kind of technique could also transcend time and space, but its power was relatively slow and weak. However, even though his incantation technique was fast and powerful, it had a flaw. The opponent had to have a wound, and the only one who was injured was Fan Tian. Faintly, the muscles under his skin started to emit a sizzling sound, and countless tiny insects wiggled under his skin. In a moment, they grew bigger and broke out of his skin. Ah! Fan Tian was wholeheartedly focused on dealing with the encirclement of the few of them, but he did not expect that he would fall into Xiao Ya's trap at the first moment. He cried out in pain, but countless bugs broke out from his skin and crawled out. In an instant, his entire body was covered with black bugs as his body contorted in pain. His entire body was like a crawling insect. Q-Sword Elder's sword light shot out and slashed through the middle. An intense light burst out from the inside. Q-Sword Elder did not even have the chance to fight back. He was killed in the blink of an eye. Fan Tian was already severely injured and did not have the ability to fight. Being killed instantly was within his expectations. An immortal king of a generation had fallen just like that. The surrounding people were also shocked. Today, not only did they witness a battle between immortal kings, they also witnessed the fall of an immortal king. On the other hand, Lu Jiaoyang witnessed such a shocking scene. She knew that she could not win in a fight, and her only chance was to escape. She immediately clasped her 5 fingers together, and an explosive sound came from her body. The space around her fluctuated, and her figure disappeared in a flash. In the next moment, the surface of the sea exploded with hundreds of meters of water. Like a flood dragon entering the water. He wanted to use the water to escape. He originally had the bloodline of a flood dragon in his body, so his name had the word, Flood Dragon. In the water, he had an advantage over any of the immortal kings present. Lu Chongkong snorted coldly, and stood on the surface of the water like a ghost. In the world he was in, it was as if everything had quieted down. It was extremely strange, and his entire person was standing straight. He continuously chanted incantations, and when the incantations rang out, the cold air from all directions surged towards his hands, which were changing like wheels. Condense. Lu Chongkong suddenly struck the surface of the sea with his palm. Everyone finally understood that Lu Chongkong knew that the other party wanted to use the water to escape, and wanted to freeze the sea. Is he crazy? The Crown Prince of Western Zhou exclaimed in shock. This was too outrageous. Of course, the immortal king did have the strength to freeze the surrounding sea, but the speed of his freezing could not catch up to the speed of the other party's escape technique. Naive. The people at the side were all stunned speechless. No, that state preceptor cried out involuntarily. It's the immortal martial manual. What? Everyone's eyes widened. The words immortal martial manual were too magical. On the immortal martial rankings, the immortal martial manual was ranked first. Lu Chongkong calmly said, the 13th volume of the immortal martial manual, I seal. A very, very long time ago, it was already impossible to trace who had passed down this immortal martial manual. According to legend, the contents of the immortal martial manual were all heaven-shaking and earth-shattering immortal martial arts. Just a fragment of a page could allow one to roam the immortal martial continent unhindered, and it was ranked first on the immortal martial rankings by the Lingxi Pavilion. And there was such a page in the Qianqing school. This volume was about the great Tao of water, and only Lu Chongkong had cultivated it. Jiang Xiu had also cultivated it in the past, but whether he had succeeded or not was still a mystery. At that time, based on Jiang Luoxia's usual behavior and talent, he had definitely cultivated it. However, no one had ever seen him use it before. The moment Lu Chongkong's palm came into contact with the surface of the sea, the speed of the freezing seemed to be in fast motion. Thousands of miles of ice were rapidly frozen. Even if the water rushed up to a height of tens of meters, or even hundreds of meters, it was frozen in mid-air until it reached the sea level. As far as the eye could see, there was no end in sight. How vast the sea was, and how turbulent the water was. How powerful must one's magic power be to be able to instantly freeze everything? This was truly too shocking. Many people were so shocked that their jaws almost dropped. Was this the power of the immortal martial manual? It was truly far from being comparable to the immortal martial manuals circulating in the immortal martial continent. Has he been sealed in ice? Everyone's impression was that even ordinary heaven immortals could break free from the immortal martial manual, let alone immortal kings, who would be able to break the ice in the next instant. However, they definitely didn't expect that even immortal kings wouldn't be able to break the ice in an instant. The extent of the ice seal was far beyond their imagination. Just a few dozen miles away, Lu Jiaoyang was doing his best to break free from the seal. And right at this moment, a celestial figure suddenly appeared. Lu Jiaoyang saw a formless sword light shooting down from above. This was really F***ed up. He was standing there with his hands and feet tied, waiting to be killed. He refused to accept this. Only now did he realize that he had fallen into the deep hole he had dug himself. In the past, he had heard that there was a page of the immortal martial manual in the Qianqing school that was related to the great Tao of water. He had really played himself to death. If he hadn't entered the water and been sealed in the middle, he wouldn't have died so easily. In the end, what appeared in his mind was a beam of light, an incomparably resplendent beam of light. After his mind was filled with white light, he no longer had any consciousness. Xiao Ye and Elder Chen Jian worked together to kill one person, while Lu Chongkong and Elder of Law Enforcement worked together to kill the other. The division of labor was clear and efficient. All of this seemed very complicated, but it all happened in the blink of an eye. A moment of life and death. And Dong Wujuan knew that there was a possibility that he would be blocked no matter what kind of immortal martial technique he used. He absolutely couldn't allow Jiang Xiu to live. Absolutely not. Die for this whole lord. He gritted his teeth. With a whoosh, a strange and unpredictable soul attack blasted towards Jiang Xiu's mind. In an instant, the inside of his mind turned white. His entire brain had been pierced through by a strange power. No. Heaven-crossing lamenting leaves. If Jiang Xiu died, he would definitely make Dong Wujuan accompany him in death. It's too late. Dong Wujuan soared into the sky. He had already completed his sure-kill attack, and the next thing he had to do was to escape. He could already feel that the auras of his two immortal king subordinates had already been cut off. He sighed in his heart, feeling both anger and hatred. Although they were dead, he had preserved the glory of the reincarnation palace. Jiang Xiu has been killed by me. Qianqing School, my reincarnation palace is not so easy to bully. Dong Wujuan suddenly shook his long sleeves as he flew, and an extremely terrifying power swept out towards the sword light. With a bang, he was about to take advantage of the impact to escape. But in the midst of all this, Yang Zhuzi's eyes almost popped out. Jiang Xiu, the person he hated so much, was looking at him with a blank expression and moving his lips. Why was it a soul attack? Couldn't it have been something else? Any random attack would have killed him. Chapter 585. Retrograde Leaf was filled with regret. He hated himself so much that he wanted nothing more than to pull out his sword and cut his own throat. He had actually allowed Dong Wujuan to charge over. As for the elders of the Qianqing School, they were all furious. The spectators also felt a wave of pity. Things had already gotten to this point, and the Hall of Reincarnation had been forced into a corner. In the end, they had still failed at the last step. No one could defend against soul attacks. The first thing that every immortal king would think of was to refine a soul-defensive magic treasure. Even if they didn't have this condition, they would still do everything they could to strengthen their own soul. When facing an immortal king, a weak soul attack might not be able to kill him in one blow. Some weak soul attacks could only cause some soul interference. But for souls below the immortal king level, as long as it was a soul attack, no matter how weak it would all be insta-killed. There was no suspense. This had never happened in the history of the immortal martial continent, nor was it recorded in the books. The souls of immortal kings were originally much stronger than those of ordinary great celestial immortals and celestial immortals. Once they formed an attack, of course they would be insta-killed. However, Jiang Xiu was still standing there. Although he didn't move, his lively eyes, lively expression, and undulating chest all showed that he wasn't dead. In fact, he didn't feel anything at all. He wasn't dead? More accurately, he was fine. No, impossible. Dong Wujuan cried out involuntarily. He had clearly focused his attack on Jiang Xiu just now, but how could he not be dead? Could it be that he had a soul-defensive magic treasure on him? After all, he came from a large sect like the Qianqing School. But just now, Dong Wujuan didn't feel any form of resistance. What was going on? No matter why Jiang Xiuyin was fine, it was true that he was alive. In the current situation, the idiot would be in an awkward position. Retrograde Leaf was overjoyed. He laughed loudly. Dong Wujuan, you've lost. You've completely lost. As his laughter rang out, he charged over with a whoosh. The other four elders were stunned, but they reacted extremely quickly. 4 streaks of light flashed over, encircling Dong Wujuan. One against 5 celestial kings. Just now, when Fan Tian and Lu Jiaoyang were facing the Qianqing school's elders, they had been cleanly defeated in a 1-on-2 battle. The strength of the Qianqing school was no joke. Now that there were 4 elders and the bitter retrograde leaf, even if Dong Wujuan was stronger than them, he knew that if he was entangled with 5 immortal kings, he would definitely die. However, Zhang Xiu was not dead yet. He was still alive and standing there perfectly fine. Dong Wujuan gritted his teeth in hatred, but he was different from his subordinates. Fan Tian could risk his life for the sake of the Reincarnation Palace, but he could not do so. In his opinion, if the reputation of the Reincarnation Palace was destroyed, then he did not want it. He could build another assassin organization, but if he lost his life, then everything would be over. Therefore, he decided to escape without hesitation. Being able to escape from the encirclement of 5 celestial kings was an honorable thing to do. Zhang Xiu, you little bastard, consider yourself lucky. Just as Dong Wujuan was about to leave, a person suddenly appeared in front of him. At this time, no one could be so fast. None of the 5 celestial kings could be so fast, except for one person. Hua! All the onlookers exclaimed at this moment, extremely shocked. Because the person who stopped Dong Wujuan was no one else, but Zhang Xiu. Everyone's minds could not process it, and they crashed. Is he courting death? With a heavenly god, or more accurately, a heavenly god's heavily injured body, intercepting a celestial king, even if he was at his peak, the other party would also be able to move his fingers. Was he willing to die to keep Dong Wujuan? Everyone could not understand. Was it necessary? In order to keep Dong Wujuan, he had sacrificed his own life. Although he was heavily injured, he was still alive in the end. As long as he was alive, he could slowly recover. Once he lost his life, he would have nothing left. Dong Wujuan's gaze was extremely cold. There was coldness, anger, and confusion. You, Zhang Xiu, had not suffered a loss from the beginning. He was only doing business, and there was no hatred to speak of. Was it necessary to risk your life like this? Or were you arrogant enough to think that all the people who were chasing after you would all die, just based on the fact that you could survive just now? Idiot! Dong Wujuan raised his hand, and immediately, a wave of fluctuations spread out in the air. A head that was several acres large appeared out of thin air, and its 5 fingers struck out together. The first soul attack had been ineffective, so no matter how stupid he was, he would not use it a second time. With the power of a celestial king, it would be easy for him to kill those of a lower level. Die for me! There was no suspense. This time, there was no miracle. Zhang Xiu's body twisted strangely, and then, like the air, it could not bear the burden and exploded with a loud bang. Killed in one blow. No, that's not right. Everyone felt that something was wrong, but they could not figure it out. But very quickly, they realized where the problem lay. This killing was too straightforward, and there was not even a mist of blood. It was more like he had destroyed a shadow. Suddenly, everyone turned to look at Zhang Xiu's original position. He was still standing there, perfectly fine. Dong Wujuan's eyes suddenly widened. His face first turned green, then white, and then green and white. He had actually been tricked by a clumsy illusion that even a child could see through at a glance. Many of the people present had played this trick before. When they first started cultivating, they would use it to show off to their younger siblings or junior apprentice brothers and sisters for fun. In the immortal martial continent, there was also a professional name for it: fishing. Using a fake to trick you, but this kind of illusion was too fake. The first time one saw it, they would be shocked, but if one looked closely, they would not even need to use eye techniques to see through it. But it was this kind of clumsy child's trick that had fooled the famous palace master of the Reincarnation Palace, Dong Wujuan. And the result of being fooled was that he was trapped by 5 celestial kings. In the distance, Zhang Xiu only smiled lightly, as if everything was within his expectations. Dong Wujuan must have been very emotional at that moment. His mind was filled with confusion, anger, and hatred, and he still had to face the pursuit of 5 celestial kings. In this kind of situation, all his reactions were almost instinctive, and there was no way for him to calmly make judgments. So once something happened, it was an emergency response in his emotional state. This was the mentality of a normal person. When Jiang Xiu actually dared to stop him, Dong Wujuan lost control of his emotions. He wanted to tear apart this person in front of him who had destroyed the foundation of his reincarnation palace. Anger, hatred, and the pressure of his life being in danger made him attack Jiang Xiu without thinking at all. When Dong Wujuan was surrounded, he looked at Jiang Xiu with a gaze that wanted nothing more than to drink his blood and eat his flesh, but at the same time, there was also a trace of fear. When everyone understood how Dong Wujuan had fallen into such a desperate situation, the way they looked at Jiang Xiu changed, and there was also a trace of fear. This person was terrifying. If Dong Wujuan died here today, then the reincarnation palace would really be erased from this world. Although there were many assassins in the reincarnation palace, there were only 4 celestial kings in the core, especially the palace master Dong Wujuan. Out of 4, 3 were gone, and with the loss of this mission, the reincarnation palace no longer had the foundation to stand on. How could they rely on one celestial king to support the reincarnation palace's ruined reputation? Who would have thought that the reincarnation palace, which dominated the immortal martial arts and made people tremble in fear, would be destroyed by a celestial god? Ha ha ha. Retrograde Leaf laughed. This time, he would not let Dong Wujuan escape. He firmly sealed his breath, but in his heart, he thought even more highly of Jiang Xiu. This person's talent and scheming were both top-notch. Back then, he had only relied on the fact that the Black Fault Sword had been refined into a natal artifact to determine that he was still alive and nearby, allowing him to escape from hell. Jiang Xiu said indifferently, "Dong Wujuan, you're finished." His tone was very calm, but in Dong Wujuan's ears, it was like the tolling of his death knell, causing his entire mind to tremble, and his face to turn pale without a trace of blood. Indeed, he was finished. If he had not attacked just now and admitted defeat, perhaps only Fan Tian would have died. Now, he had lost everything. Ha ha ha. Dong Wujuan gritted his teeth. "Ignorant child, you dare to lie to me, lie to me." "I, Dong Wujuan, am not convinced. To be played to death by someone who was so much weaker than him, no one would be convinced." He roared like a madman. "Jiang Xiu, and you, do you think you can kill this palace master? You're not worthy." Dong Wujuan suddenly vomited, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Then, his entire body exploded. Seeing this scene, everyone was moved. He actually committed suicide. Chapter 586. Dong Wujuan's body continued to explode with powerful qi, making firecracker-like noises. At the same time, his body trembled violently, and his limbs and bones were all destroyed. This scene caused everyone to be moved. He would rather commit suicide than be killed by the 5 immortal kings, because he couldn't accept the fact that he had been tricked by a mere divine realm expert. It was too shameful. No one wanted to be outsmarted by others, especially those who prided themselves on their intelligence. He would rather choose this seemingly generous way of dying. Fresh blood and qi continued to explode from Dong Wujuan's body. Before long, his body was in tatters. His eyes were wide open, almost popping out of their sockets. He died with his eyes wide open. His body slowly fell to the ground. Humph! The retrograde leaf snorted with disdain. "You have the courage to die, but not the courage to fight. What a joke." Bang! The body fell from a height of several hundred feet and crashed heavily to the ground. It was over. It was really over. The king of assassins of a generation had ended up like this. It was sad and sad at the same time. After all, they had provoked Jiang Xiu first, but in the end, they had been played to death. Patriarch of Law Enforcement's figure flashed and appeared beside Dong Wujuan's body. He reached out his hand and took out a steel ring. It looked very simple, a bit like a cow's nose ring, but it was a rare soul defense-type magic weapon. This was the spoils of war of the Tianqing school. Logically speaking, the 4 elders should share it with Jiang Xiu. Of course, It should be the retrograde leaf, but the retrograde leaf definitely didn't have much use, so he was too embarrassed to ask. Although Jiang Xiu was the former sect master in their eyes, in this matter, the main deterrent force was still them. The elders had taken action, so Jiang Xiu had a share. In the end, it was the four of them who shared it. There was only one treasure, and it couldn't be divided into 4 parts. This was a bit troublesome, but it wasn't Jiang Xiu's concern. Now, although he had solved the problem of the Samsara Palace, he had a huge problem of his own. His natal artifact was shattered. In other words, the foundation of his cultivation had been shaken. It was like the foundation of a 100-story building had been shattered by someone. Anyone who stepped into the building could cause the building to collapse. Even if no one entered, the sun and wind could still cause the building to collapse. In other words, Jiang Xiu's situation was very bad. He might not die, but it was very difficult for him to use his spiritual power. Many people would die on the spot when their natal divine artifacts shattered. Usually, when faced with the shattering of their natal divine artifacts, they would instinctively defend it with their lives. Therefore, when their natal divine artifacts were destroyed, they would also die on the spot. However, Jiang Xiu was not so stubborn at that time. When faced with a situation where their natal divine artifact was destroyed, some people would choose to recultivate it, but there were also some people who would choose to repair it. However, Jiang Xiu's natal divine artifact contained the foundation of the world's laws, as well as the laws of Wind's great perfection. If he were to recultivate it, everything would be gone. Jiang Xiu only pondered for a moment before deciding to repair his natal divine artifact. The price of recultivating was too great, and the world laws were too hard to come by. However, it wasn't easy to repair it. "Are you all right?" Several elders and retrograde leaf gathered around him. The elders didn't directly address Jiang Xiu as sect leader Jiang in front of outsiders. After all, this was a serious matter. Jiang Xiu's identity couldn't be exposed outside. If they exposed Jiang Xiu's identity, his friends might not necessarily come to protect him, but his enemies would definitely come to take revenge. Jiang Xiu said bitterly, "My natal divine artifact is destroyed." Everyone knew what this meant. Before it shattered, Retrograde Leaf could still see that Jiang Xiu had reached the great celestial immortal realm. However, the current Jiang Xiu couldn't be seen anymore. His aura couldn't even catch up with that of a heavenly god, let alone have any magic power. Xia Shun asked, "What are your plans for the future?" The elders at the side were all very regretful, and Retrograde Leaf was even more so. Originally, the news of Jiang Xiu reaching the great celestial immortal realm was about to spread. Coupled with today's incident, his reputation would immediately soar, and he would be Jiang Luoxia No. 2. However, all his future prospects were now ruined. Jiang Xiu said, "I'll think of a way to repair my natal divine artifact." Elder Q-Sword nodded when he heard this, and asked, "When you first embarked on the path of spiritual cultivation, was it because your Jindan was destroyed?" Although it wasn't far off. Although his Jindan wasn't destroyed, it wasn't formed either. However, if he nodded, wouldn't he be admitting that he was Jiang Luoxia? He smiled and said, "At that time, I was ignorant about cultivation. I just learned whatever I could." It's not easy to repair a natal divine artifact. Some people can't do it in their entire lives. Jiang Xiu frowned. This was indeed the case. He didn't have the slightest confidence in this matter. Xia Shun said, "What about you now? Are you going back to the sect first?" Jiang Xiu pondered for a moment, then shook his head and said, "I'm not going back yet. I'll stay here and find a place to recuperate." This was the source of the Heaven's Inquisition talisman. If he wanted to repair his natal divine artifact, this was the only opportunity. "That's fine too." Xia Shun and the others hurried over. They were going to return to the Dragon Vein soon, so they didn't pass by Tianqing School. Otherwise, they would have to make a special trip. It was too troublesome. However, you might not be safe here. Jiang Xiu said, "Don't worry. The Reincarnation Palace has lost 3 leaders. They must be in chaos internally. Who would have the time to find trouble with me? They can't even take care of themselves. Then you can do as you see fit. In fact, even if you return to the sect, it might not be safe. It might even be more dangerous. The Ji Dao sect wanted his life, the Tai Hua sect wanted his life, and Gu Daqian also wanted his life. Then we'll take our leave first. Zhang Xiu cupped his hands and bowed to them. Today, whether it was for the dignity of the Qianqing school or for him, Zhang Luoxia, he had to thank them. As soon as they finished speaking, the four of them flew away in streaks of light. After they left, only Retrograde Leaf was left. He said, "Brother, let's find a place to sit down and have a drink." Great. Retrograde Leaf was much more carefree. He quickly disappeared into the crowd with Zhang Xiu. They flew over a city in western Zhou and arrived at another state capital. They were hundreds of miles away, and the hustle and bustle disappeared. The streets were bustling with people, but not many people cared about what happened in the holy capital. The two of them entered a small tavern. The waiter quickly greeted them, "Guests, please come in. What would you like to order?" Zhang Xiu said, "The best wine." Retrograde Leaf said, "The best bitter tea." Zhang Xiu knew that Ku Jini never drank. He wouldn't touch anything that could be enjoyed. He wanted to let Ku Jini continuously stimulate his strength and fighting spirit. The two of them sat opposite each other. Zhang Xiu said, "When you used Heaven Crossing Sorrow Leaf to deal with Fentian, I was really worried for you." Retrograde Leaf laughed and said, "How can there be so many geniuses in this world?" Zhang Xiu said, "But it's not good to leave a flaw." Retrograde Leaf's face darkened and said, "As long as no one knows." He took a sip of the bitter tea and wrinkled his nose. It was really bitter, but it didn't taste like tea at all. "So, I killed all of my disciples and didn't leave a single one." Zhang Xiu, he looked at Retrograde Leaf in astonishment. This wasn't just because he didn't want anyone to know about the flaw in Heaven Crossing Sorrow Leaf. More importantly, he hated Di Chongqing and hated his betrayal. "I know that too." Retrograde Leaf said, "You won't tell anyone. Otherwise, you wouldn't have saved me and returned Hey Quebec." Zhang Xiu said, "I'll think of a way to make up for Heaven Crossing Sorrow Leaf's flaw." Retrograde Leaf nodded. A trace of pain flashed past his eyes. He had personally killed his own disciples. Even if he didn't regret it then, he would definitely regret it now. This pain would definitely be like a poisonous snake swallowing his heart. The clear sky suddenly began to rain. There weren't many guests in the quiet restaurant. Zhang Xiu and Retrograde Leaf sat quietly. They didn't talk much, but it was very comfortable. Having someone to accompany was better than being alone. Retrograde Leaf would say some things, but they were all in the clouds. Zhang Xiu didn't understand what he said, but he just listened. He didn't want you to understand everything. He just needed to listen. The rain continued until the afternoon. Retrograde Leaf wanted to leave. Even though the situation was bitter, it belonged to him. Seeing his old friend leave, Zhang Xiu's gaze was attracted by the clouds in the sky. He opened his eyes wide in disbelief. In the sky, it condensed into the faintest white clouds. At this moment, Zhang Xiu felt indescribably shocked. What was the connection? Chapter 587. Zhang Xiu felt an inexplicable feeling when he saw the faintest cloud form in the sky again. He, Earth, and the Saintess were connected by the same scenery, as if they were face to face. Very close, very close. Zhang Xiu even felt that the person in the sky was the Saintess, but she couldn't come down and come to this world. However, she yearned to come here. "Waiter." "Sir?" Zhang Xiu pointed at the cloud in the sky and asked, "Do you see the cloud in the sky?" The waiter smiled and said, "Of course. Sir, you're a foreigner, right? Every time it rains, a cloud will form in the sky. It's amazing, isn't it? However, we Western Zhou people are used to it." Zhang Xiu asked, "After every rain?" The cloud was too realistic. The more he looked at it, the more vivid it became. Even its charming eyes and expressions were like real people. "How can this be?" The manservant said. "Oh, dear guest, you've stumped me. Ever since I was born, I've known that there was such a thing. Whenever it rains, the clouds of the gods will appear. But as for the reason behind the healing, I don't know." This was very strange. Even Jiang Xiu couldn't figure it out. Why would the clouds after the rain gather to form the saintess's cloud elephant every time? What did it contain? Of course, this wouldn't happen without a reason. How did it happen the first time? The waiter shook his head again. Jiang Xiu asked, "Are there any records of it?" The waiter said, "You'll have to go to the national team and look it up. Perhaps there are records of it, but these aren't things that ordinary people like us would know." Jiang Xiu smiled and took out a spirit stone and tossed it to the waiter. "Arrange a room for me on the top. It needs to be quiet." "All right." The waiter took the spirit stone and grinned. He had met a generous guest. That day, Jiang Xiu stayed in this inn. However, he was thinking about what happened in the ancient desert city. He didn't expect that something that he didn't pay much attention to would have such a great impact. The saintess had descended. When Xie Ting fell into the river, she looked like a completely different person. That was definitely not the original Xie Ting, but the saintess who would rather die to make the world descend. Not long after the lanterns were lit, a carriage stopped in front of the inn. The carriage was very luxurious and shiny. Behind the carriage were 2 rows of cavalry guards. These guards were all wearing armor and had ferocious masks on their faces. They looked very powerful and intimidating. Many passers-by knew that these were the Black Guards of Western Zhou. "Your Highness, this is the place." A young man dressed in a brocade robe stepped out of the carriage. He was the Crown Prince of Western Zhou. The state preceptor was also accompanying him. "Exalted Immortal Jiang lives here?" To him, this place was simply too shabby and dilapidated. Although it was considered a decent inn among the common folk, and the environment was also tranquil. When the owner of the inn saw that an important guest had arrived, he hurriedly went out to welcome him. Before he could go forward, he was stopped by the Black Guards. The Crown Prince said, "Immortal Jiang is staying at your place?" The owner of the inn had already knelt down with his servant and shouted, "Greetings, Your Highness." "Answer me." "Your Highness, we do not know who this exalted Immortal Jiang is." The Crown Prince said, "He is an incomparably handsome foreigner, but he looks somewhat weak." Before the owner of the inn could answer, the servant hurriedly said, "Yes, yes, yes. There is a handsome man who is like a god. He is a foreigner." The Crown Prince said, "Quick, lead the way." The group quickly arrived at the Sky Room. Jiang Xiu tried a few times, but his natal divine artifact was broken into pieces. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move the broken pieces. It felt like he couldn't control his heart, liver, spleen, and kidneys. He couldn't control the broken pieces of his natal divine artifact. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. It was impossible to repair a natal artifact with one's own strength. One had to rely on external help. In this aspect, Jiang Xiu had no experience. Because everyone's natal artifact was different, there was no literature to refer to. He could only feel the stones and cross the river. A voice came from outside the door. The Crown Prince of Western Zhou heard that exalted Immortal Jiang was staying here, so he came to pay a visit. Jiang Xiu did not like to be disturbed. However, since the other party had come to him, he had no reason to refuse. Moreover, he was also looking for someone who was familiar with the Western Zhou kingdom to ask about the saintess. He opened the door and saw a group of people gathered outside. The leader was a young man who looked like the Crown Prince. "Greetings, exalted Immortal Jiang Xiu of Chenqing School." He bowed respectfully to Jiang Xiu. "Crown Prince of Western Zhou, why have you come uninvited?" As a disciple of the Heaven Motion sect, Jiang Xiu was used to being arrogant when he went to various countries. The Crown Prince of Western Zhou said, "Today, I witnessed the battle between exalted Immortal Jiang and the Samsara Palace. I admire you." Jiang Xiu smiled faintly. Since exalted immortal Jiang is staying in Western Zhou, we should treat you as a distinguished guest. Jiang Xiu looked at the crown prince of Western Zhou. He was quite handsome and his eyes were full of sincerity. Although I am a student of Qianqing School in name, you should know that my natal artifact has been destroyed and my cultivation is gone. I can't go back to Qianqing School. I have neither strength nor cultivation. You don't have to come here to befriend me. The Crown Prince of Western Zhou said, Exalted immortal Jiang, you must be joking. She raised her head slightly, her beautiful eyes were like a painting, her eyes were like dots of lacquer, her nose was high, and her red lips were tender and charming. She was truly a peerless beauty. She was actually Jiang Xiu's Tongfang maid, Shan Guan Zhaorong. Although she was a Tongfang maid, she had been with Jiang Xiu for so long and had yet to sleep with him. When the news of Jiang Xiu staying in Western Zhou came back, the elder ordered Jiang Xiu's servants to take care of his daily needs. As a result, Shangguan Zhaorong came all the way here. Chapter 588. The Crown Prince of Western Zhou arranged a courtyard for Jiang Xiu near the west mountain of the imperial palace. It was full of spiritual energy and was a good place to cultivate. Many members of the imperial family did not even have such treatment. However, Jiang Xiu's natal artifact was damaged and he did not plan to repair it. His cultivation was almost on hold. When he was free, he fulfilled his promise to the retrograde leaf of misery and helped him perfect the sorrowful leaf of heaven-crossing leaf. The palace maids at the side felt strange. This exalted immortal often held a sword and waved it around in the imperial garden. Then, he would go into a daze for most of the day. Is this exalted immortal real or fake? Many people say that his natal artifact is broken and he can no longer cultivate. The palace maids whispered below. There were some complaints in the imperial palace about the crown prince's decision to bring such a person to live in the imperial palace and treat him like this. In their opinion, if one wanted to make friends, they should make friends with a true exalted immortal, not a person whose cultivation was almost crippled. Isn't that so? Although they dared to talk about it in private, they still treated Jiang Xiu with respect. Master. Suddenly, a pleasant voice sounded. A beautiful girl stood in the distance. Her voice carried both joy and sadness. She naturally knew why Jiang Xiu did not return to Qianqing School. Jiang Xiu looked back and was slightly surprised. Why are you here? Shangguan Zhaorong half squatted and bowed. I've been ordered by the sect to take care of Master's daily life. Jiang Xiu said, Since you're here, make the arrangements. What about the others? Shangguan Zhaorong said, the sect asked them to return home temporarily and wait for Master to return. Jiang Xiu smiled faintly. They were not ordered by the sect, they were chased out. Why don't you return to Jialun? Regardless of whether they returned on their own or were chased away, with their relationship with the Sky Motion sect and their relationship with Jiang Xiu as their master and servant, they would definitely be able to live like gods in the Jialan Empire. Shangguan Zhaorong said, Zhaorong said that I will repay you with my life, no matter what happens to me. It's good that you're here. Don't you know how to make medicine? Zhaorong Shangguan said, Zhaorong will definitely take good care of young master. If one's natal artifact was broken, it was hard to say if one could take the medicine properly. How's Qianqing School? Zhaorong Shangguan said, Sect Master Ji has already decided on a new location. If nothing unexpected happens, moving the sect is imperative. Jiang Xiu muttered to himself. The Ji Daozong was stubbornly clinging to his own course. He was afraid that some people were already planning to assassinate him before he left the sect. He believed that it wouldn't be long before this matter would explode, and the result would have a huge impact on Qianqing School. Young master, let Zhaorong take your pulse. The long sword in Jiang Xiu's hand danced lightly. Arrange the accommodations first. We'll talk later. Yes. Jiang Xiu didn't know what Zhaorong Shangguan's medical skills were like, but it couldn't be that high. Compared to the godly doctors he knew, she was definitely far worse. Zhang Xiu thought that if he couldn't find anything here, he would set out to find those godly doctors to think of a solution. Not only is he eating and drinking here, but he even called his maid over. Is he planning on staying here permanently? Shh, be quiet. Several palace maids sent Zhao Rong Shangguan to Zhang Xiu's residence. They timidly whispered behind him. Zhao Rong Shangguan had grown up in the palace, so she knew this place too well. The inner court of the palace was a place with strange waves and incomparably ugly human nature. Does Miss live in a side courtyard? That's not bad. It's warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Zhao Rong Shangguan said without hesitation, I am young master's maid. I live wherever young master lives. Hearing this, the palace maids on the side were stunned and hurriedly lowered their heads. Tongfang maids were different from normal maids. If they had a relationship, the man would naturally treat them differently. These palace maids had been a bit impudent before, so they hurriedly restrained themselves. But this was for Zhao Rong Shangguan to see. You can leave. I will take care of it. Yes. Seeing this, the palace maids felt something was wrong. She was an expert. Wait, have someone arrange a medicine room outside young master's palace. I need to use. Yes. In the afternoon, Zhao Rong Shangguan took Zhang Xiu's pulse for the first time. She seemed to be doing well, but she didn't know what the results would be. Zhao Rong Shangguan's expression was very serious. After a while she stopped. The damage to the natal relic has already begun to affect young master's divine body. It has already begun to degenerate. Hearing Zhao Rong Shangguan say this, Zhang Xiu also had some feelings. His biggest regret was that the third rune was complete, but because his natal relic had been destroyed, the Protoss's innate talent had not awakened. Moreover, as long as he didn't recover, the third Protoss's innate talent would not awaken. It seemed that this little girl had some skills. From today onwards, Zhao Rong will help young master adjust the medicine to heal his natal relic. Zhang Xiu knew his own situation. He was only injured and could recover through cultivation or medicine. However, the sword embryo was shattered and scattered all over the ground. Broken porcelain could be glued back together, but how could it be glued back together when it was smashed into powder? His Highness the Crown Prince has arrived. The announcement was made. Zhang Xiu naturally did not move. The palace maids at the door all knelt down and saluted. Zhao Rong Shangguan stood up and bowed slightly. The Crown Prince of Western Zhou strode over. Great Immortal, good news. Zhang Xiu's eyes lit up. You found it? Yes, I found it. The Crown Prince of Western Zhou was excited. It is said that after the fall of the god of Buzhou, only the land where the god resided was spared from being submerged by the sea. However, the entire world became a vast expanse of water. Day after day passed, and the world remained the same. There was nothing in this world except for the ocean. The sun rose and set, and the moon rose and set. God stood alone on the land. She felt lonely and could not bear to see the world become so vast. Everyone present was surprised. If that was true, how could the world be so prosperous today? Immortal martial arts were prevalent and hundreds of races were prominent. Thus, the god did something. She allowed another world to descend. Zhang Xiu's eyes suddenly lit up. She felt that even if this legend wasn't true, there would definitely be similar situations happening. Wasn't this the case for Earth? The Saintess had allowed a different world to descend and merge with Earth. The other world merged with our world and became a new world. Not long after, the new world welcomed prosperity and gave birth to the immortal martial civilization, which is now the immortal martial continent. The Crown Prince of Western Zhou did not expect their god to be so great. Although she was not the creator of the world, she could be said to have single-handedly fulfilled this world. But she sacrificed herself. Since then, whenever it rains, a cloud image of the god will appear in the sky. Once again, it was the same on earth. Although they did not know why the cloud image of the saint was summoned, she did sacrifice herself to allow another world to descend. The Crown Prince of Western Zhou was very excited to be able to complete Zhang Xiu's task. It was as if he had accomplished a great task. And to Zhang Xiu, this was indeed a great task. Zhang Xiu asked, "Then is there any legend of the god's manifestation in Western Zhou? Has the god returned?" The Crown Prince said, "In the past, there were legends of the god descending in the flesh of mortal women to travel and enjoy the immortal martial arts. But those were all legends and were not recorded in the canon." Descending in the flesh? The scene of Xie Ting underwater appeared in Zhang Xiu's mind again. At that time, she was submerged in the water and reached out to him for help. But he did not move or even struggle. Who would not die after falling into the water? Those who could swim would naturally swim upstream. Even those who could not would struggle. It was very strange to be motionless, as if he was possessed. After that, it was as if he had become a different person. What followed was the arrival of another world. Xie Ting's body had been borrowed. Her original intention was to descend to this world to overthrow the rule of the Ming dynasty. Now, Zhang Xiu only needed her to play. After all, Zhang Xiu had helped her on Earth. Based on her understanding of the heavenly questioning stone talisman, Zhang Xiu was sure that she had a way to restore his natal artifact. But the problem now was how to get the saint to descend. He needed a woman's body. Legend has it that the body of a mortal woman was borrowed by the god. Are there any records of this? Or is there anything special about it? The Crown Prince of Western Zhou said, "We have to send people to collect this information. But it is said that these mortal women have very special constitutions. There may not be one in thousands of years. Therefore, the god only descends once every few thousand years." Chapter 589. In Western Zhou, this was only a legend. It only happened once every few thousand years. Apart from the cultivators with long lifespans, no one had ever seen it with their own eyes. In Western Zhou, those who could live for thousands of years were already immortals. It was likely that no one in Western Zhou had ever seen a goddess appear. The Western Zhou Crown Prince himself said this, but he didn't believe that there was such a thing as a goddess appearing in another person's body. The old pedant behind him had a strange expression on his face. He wanted to say something, but he knew that he had no right to speak in front of the Crown Prince. Moreover, at his age, he didn't have any intention of making a name for himself, so he could only accept it. However, Zhang Xiu had a thoughtful expression on his face. He believed it, and deeply believed it because he had personally experienced and seen it with his own eyes. The only question was whether or not the saintess had been burned to death. Judging from the clouds in the sky, she should still be alive. However, she had appeared in a different world. He was certain that she was no longer on Earth or in her original world. Where had she gone? What needed to be done to bring her to the immortal martial continent? In the ancient desert city, they didn't do anything after breaking in. The Heavenly Questions runestones had already been scattered outside. The only key was that Xie Ting had a special constitution, which allowed her to become the medium for the saintess to appear on Earth. Did this mean that if there was a girl with a constitution like Xie Ting, the saintess would have a chance to appear? But how did the saintess know that a suitable body would appear? Was it because she could sense it as soon as it appeared? Or was it because of some kind of inducement? The Crown Prince said, "Hanlin Scholar, your servant is here. Did you hear what the exalted immortal said? Go and investigate the matter of a goddess descending to the mortal world. Do it quickly. Use everything you can to investigate." The old pedant bowed and said, "Yes. Reporting to your highness, there is indeed a precedent for a goddess descending to the mortal world. I read about it in an ancient book. A mortal woman's family received a gift from the Emperor of Western Zhou. Her entire family was promoted and became rich." The Crown Prince said, "There was such a thing? Why didn't you say so earlier?" The old pedant was embarrassed. If it weren't for the Crown Prince's orders, he wouldn't have wanted to join in the fun. "So, there really is a goddess descending to the mortal world?" "Yes." The old keeper was very certain. The ancient records were very clear. This incident happened during the reign of our Yongchong Emperor, more than 5,000 years ago. At that time, the gods descended upon our Western Zhou. The Yongchang Emperor immediately rewarded the mortal woman's family for their meritorious service to the court. It could be said that one person achieved Dao and the whole family ascended. It was an ordinary mortal family, even somewhat poor. The surname of this family is Zhou. The Western Zhou Crown Prince said, "Could it be?" The Crown Prince's guess was correct, the keeper said. Prime Minister Zhou's family. The Zhou family prospered because of this incident? Everyone was very surprised. Even the Crown Prince of Western Zhou had a look of disbelief on his face. If this was the case, then the so-called god's arrival in Western Zhou must be true. The Crown Prince of Western Zhou exchanged a glance with Zhang Xiu and immediately understood what Zhang Xiu was thinking. He changed the topic and asked, "Is this the reason why successive emperors took good care of the Zhou family? Do you think that the Zhou family will have a female disciple who will become a god and lend her body?" "I don't know," the keeper said. "But I think that's part of the reason." Zhang Xiu interjected. When the god descended to Western Zhou, the girl whose body was borrowed, what kind of special constitution did she have? This was the crux of the matter. If it was so special that only one person appeared every few thousand years, then this method would not work. Unless he was lucky and waited for a pie to fall from the sky, Zhang Xiu would not bet on this. The keeper said, "In reply to the great immortal, your humble servant has not studied this particular constitution. I need to go back and read some books." It seemed that this person was not good at cultivation. Zhang Xiu could only nod. The Crown Prince continued, "This child is very important to the great immortal. Immediately go back and have someone investigate thoroughly. As soon as possible, determine the woman's constitution that can allow the god to descend. This is also related to the fate of Western Zhou." Zhang Xiu had urged the god to descend to Western Zhou. This was an auspicious omen for the fate of Western Zhou. As the future emperor, he would bring glory to his family and his name would be recorded in the annals of Western Zhou, just like his ancestor Yongchang. "Yes, Your Majesty." The group of people knelt down one after another. The Crown Prince dismissed the group of people. When he had time, the Crown Prince would stay with Zhang Xiu. Sometimes, when Zhang Xiu was comprehending the sword, he would watch from the side. He had a strong determination to cultivate and become stronger, and was good at dealing with people. He had a very close relationship with the state preceptor of Western Zhou. Zhang Xiu could see that the Crown Prince wanted to learn something from Zhang Xiu. However, most of Zhang Xiu's knowledge came from Tianqing School, and the school strictly forbade its disciples from teaching outside. "Great Immortal, this is..." He had long noticed Shangguan Zhaorong. Western Zhou was a large country, and he was also the Crown Prince. However, he had never seen a woman with such outstanding looks and bearing. She was somewhat dazzling. Zhang Xiu said, "She's my maid." Although Shangguan Zhaorong was not satisfied with Zhang Xiu's introduction of her, he should have added the words, "Tongfang." If he didn't, it was hard to guarantee that someone would have designs on her like in Tianqing School. She knew all too well that this was the imperial palace, but she didn't dare to be dissatisfied with the young master. Shangguan Zhaorong bowed slightly and saluted. Shangguan Zhaorong greets the Crown Prince of Western Zhou. "Great Immortal, please rise." Did you see that? This was the benefit of following Zhang Xiu. In the Jialan dynasty, she was just a lowly female official. To put it bluntly, she was just a servant in the imperial palace. However, even the Crown Prince of Western Zhou was polite to her. However, Shangguan Zhaorong's white face was still as calm as an ancient well. It wasn't clear if she didn't care about it, or if she didn't care about vanity. "Great Immortal, you've come a long way." Shangguan Zhaorong said, "There's no such thing as hard work in the sect. It's Zhaorong's good fortune to be able to take care of the young master." Her thoughts were indeed more complicated than Zhang Xiu's. She deliberately said that she was kicked out of Tianqing School so that he could take care of her. However, the result was completely different. One was that she was abandoned by Tianqing School, and the other was that Tianqing School cared about her. She wanted to warn the Crown Prince of Western Zhou. Although the young master was injured, he was still a disciple of Tianqing school. If he wanted to be rude or have any bad intentions, he'd better think twice before offending the Tianqing school. Shangguan Zhaorong didn't know that in front of the crown prince of Western Zhou, the Samsara Palace, which was feared by all, was messed up by Jiang Xiu. Forget it, the crown prince of Western Zhou felt sorry for the Samsara Palace. How did they provoke such a master? Great Immortal, have you settled down? Shangguan Zhaorong said, everything has been settled down. Thank you for your concern. She waved her slender hand casually, indicating that she was living in the young master's palace. The crown prince of Western Zhou understood. It turned out that she was a servant girl. He felt slightly disappointed. With such a face, she was indeed worthy of the genius of Tianqing school. Great Immortal, you also know medical skills? He saw that a medicine room had been set up in the hall. Everything that Lu Shu had, she also had the bearing of a doctor. I know a little. Jiang Xiu didn't care about what they said. He looked thoughtful and said to Shangguan Zhaorong, don't you want to cultivate? Let's start today. But the young master's body, Jiang Xiu said, he won't die for a while. It might be better if Li Chong came, but not everyone was as smart as Shangguan Zhaorong. He needed a helper by his side, at least to help him deal with the young master Xiao. Yes. Jiang Xiu turned to the crown prince of Western Zhou and said, your country should have a place to test one's constitution. Take Zhaorong there. Okay. Although it was tested last time, there was a problem in the end. Jiang Xiu was sure that Shangguan Zhaorong had a special constitution. Now that she had started cultivating, she had to know what kind of constitution it was so that she could achieve twice the result with half the effort. Shangguan Zhaorong bowed to Jiang Xiu and then followed the crown prince of Western Zhou. With the previous experience and the fact that she grew up in such an environment, Jiang Xiu believed that she should know how to deal with it. No one's special constitution should be made public. Whether it was coveted by others or used against enemies in the future, one more secret meant one more hope for survival. Special constitution. A physique that allowed the holy maiden to descend would only appear once every few thousand years. Jiang Xiu's expression sank. He was extremely worried in his heart and hoped that it wouldn't happen. If it was really as he expected, then there would be no chance for this matter. Chapter 590. Before the one from the Zhou clan appeared, it was unknown when the previous one had appeared, so there was no way to determine the exact cycle. The appearance of a special constitution was usually a matter of probability, and there was no specific rule. However, there were many things that couldn't be explained clearly, especially the matter of the saintess, which was mysterious and unfathomable. Not long after, Shangguan Zhaorong returned. Testing one's constitution wasn't difficult. There was a special place in the Western Zhou Imperial Palace, and the royal family's constitution testing was an absolute secret. Shangguan Zhaorong completed it herself. When she returned, Shangguan Zhaorong had a faint smile on her face, and she was even humming a lively tune. Last time at the Tianqing school, he had already determined that Shangguan Zhaorong had a special constitution, but he didn't know the specifics. This time, he definitely knew. Young master. Jiang Xiu saw the happy expression on her face, and guessed that it was a rare constitution. Shangguan Zhaorong arrived in front of him, her eyes shining. It's already been confirmed. Zhaorong's constitution is a special constitution, and it's the very rare universe floating boat. Jiang Xiu's indifferent expression changed, and his eyes couldn't help but widen. Seeing her young master's shocked expression, the little girl was very happy. To be able to surprise someone like her young master, her satisfaction was naturally bursting. Universe Tao fetus? Shangguan Zhaorong nodded. Jiang Xiu found it hard to believe. This unremarkable little girl beside him actually had a special constitution that could be ranked in the top 10 since ancient times. It's good that there's a result. Seeing Jiang Xiu's face quickly become indifferent, the joy on Shangguan Zhaorong's face also disappeared. She blinked her bright black eyes, not understanding. Was her young master not happy? Young master, what will happen to Zhao Rong in the future? Zhang Xiu said, I'm not your master, so you can cultivate on your own. If there's a problem you can't solve, you can ask me. Oh. Shangguan Zhao Rong was slightly disappointed. With such talent, she had originally thought that Zhang Xiu would accept her as a disciple. In the immortal martial continent, there was no such thing as a master and disciple relationship. There were many disciples who had dual cultivation with their masters. Logically speaking, she had the qualifications to be a disciple of anyone, including her young master, Zhang Luoxia. However, Zhang Xiu didn't react at all. Don't tell anyone else about this. Shangguan Zhao Rong said. Zhao Rong understands. The Great Space Dao embryo was a special constitution that was known to be number one in terms of compatibility, even compatible with demons. It was the highest level of cultivation cauldron. Once someone found out about it, if they valued it, they would nurture it. If they encountered someone with a vicious heart, they would become a cultivation cauldron for others. Exalted Immortal, Fairy Maiden, this is the menu. A palace maid walked in from outside, knelt down respectfully, and handed him a tray. On the tray were pieces of menu, as if he was going to a restaurant to order dishes. I will take care of young master's meals from now on. You may leave. In the end, Zhang Xiu's meals at the Chenqing school were all managed by her. Here, it should be the same. After the palace maid left, Shangguan Zhao Rong also bowed to Zhang Xiu, and then left to prepare. The sun had just set outside. Cooking now was just in time for the meal. Zhang Xiu stood in front of the hall. From where he stood, he could see the divine statue on the distant mountain. Although his cultivation seemed to be somewhat high, everyone knew that if he attacked, he would definitely suffer from a backlash. He might not even be a match for an ordinary cultivator like Shangguan Zhao Rong, and his prospects were even more bleak. You should leave. What can you not gain from me? This was Zhang Xiu's inner voice. Shangguan Zhao Rong's talent was really beyond his expectations. This kind of talent was top-notch even in the Chenqing school. Shangguan Zhao Rong could totally live another life. If she was lucky, she could even become an immortal king in the future. It would be a pity for her to be his maid. Of course, it was also possible that Shangguan Zhao Rong was worried that if she betrayed Zhang Xiu, she would be protected by Zhang Xiu. Maybe Zhang Xiu couldn't do anything to her personally, but as long as the news that she was a great space fetus spread, it would be enough to bring a devastating blow to her. Zhang Xiu ate dinner as usual, and Shangguan Zhao Rong waited on him. Young master, when will Zhao Rong start cultivating? Zhang Xiu put a piece of meat in his mouth. You can start at any time. I've already written down what you want and put it on the table. You can go get it later. It's a cultivation method I accidentally obtained. Because it has requirements for the cultivator's physique, ordinary people can't cultivate it, but your physique is enough. Shangguan Zhao Rong kowtowed. Young master worries. Zhang Xiu didn't think much of it. If these things didn't happen to him, if he was still the sect master of the Chenqing school, and if he met Shangguan Zhao Rong, he might really take her as a disciple. Perhaps thousands of years later, he could add another immortal king to the Chenqing school. But now, he had no time. To be honest, Zhang Xiu's master had a great influence on him. His master could cherish him as a talent back then, and Zhang Xiu certainly could too. You can take the cultivation method and leave. Shangguan Zhao Rong's beautiful face changed. Young master, you don't need to be afraid. I'm not testing you. Although I, Zhang Xiu, am ruthless and have killed countless people, I won't make things difficult for a little girl like you. Zhang Xiu said, Do you still remember the first time we met in the Jialan dynasty? I said I'd let you go, so I really will let you go. You don't need to worry. At that time, Zhang Xiu had kept his word. Of course, he would keep his word now. Also, you don't need to think about getting anything from me. I don't have anything that you can get from me. With your talent, find a good sect, and you'll definitely have opportunities in the future. It's much better than wasting them on me. Shangguan Zhao Rong's eyelashes gently fluttered, and she lowered her head. Is it because Zhao Rong left young master before? Therefore, young master doesn't trust Zhao Rong. From the day Zhao Rong's clan was pardoned, Zhao Rong said to myself that I would repay young master with my body, and that I wouldn't regret it until death. If young master feels that Zhao Rong wishes to receive young master's inheritance, Zhao Rong can stop cultivating for the rest of her life. The night was very quiet. Only the sound of burning charcoal could be heard from the furnace in the hall. It was already late winter. The next day, Shangguan Zhao Rong came in with breakfast as usual. Contrary to Zhang Xiu's expectations, cultivation required a lot of resources. Zhang Xiu obviously couldn't give her anything, but she really didn't leave. After breakfast, Zhang Xiu went to the imperial garden and waved his sword casually. Half a month later, the crown prince of Western Zhou, who hadn't shown up for a long time, came in excitedly. He said happily, "Great Immortal, I've investigated the matter you asked me to investigate." This matter would have been easy to investigate in the past, but now it involved the secrets of one of the 4 great families of Western Zhou. It was inevitable that he would be under a lot of pressure to dig up the secrets of their ancestors. Is that so? The crown prince of Western Zhou looked around, then handed a letter to Zhang Xiu. The agreement is in this letter. The Zhou family is already a rich and powerful family in Western Zhou. This matter can't be spread. Zhang Xiu nodded. However, that body constitution is too special. Even if the entire Great Western Zhou was gathered together, it wouldn't be possible. Even the Chenqing school might not be able to do it. Zhang Xiu knew how difficult it would be. But things were so coincidental, and the heavens played a huge joke on him. Due to the crown prince's caution, he didn't open the letter outside. Instead, he returned to the hall. When he opened the letter, there were 4 words written on it. Great Space Tau Fetus Mutation. It was the same as Shangguan Zhaorong's body constitution. Zhang Xiu would never have thought that his opportunity would be with Shangguan Zhaorong. However, this matter was too unfair to her. It was just like what happened to Xie Ting. Her body was possessed, but where was the original Xie Ting? The most likely possibility was that she was dead, because there was the word mutation at the end. Zhang Xiu was indeed a person who would do anything to achieve his goals, but he was ruthless to his enemies. He cherished his family and friends very much. At this moment, he was very hesitant, and his expression turned ugly. Maybe there's another way. When he heard footsteps, he casually tucked the letter into a book. "Sir, have some tea." Shangguan Zhaorong came in with a cup of spiritual tea. What did the crown prince of Western Zhou say? Zhang Xiu shook his head. It seems that this path won't work. It's unwise to bet on an ancient legend. I have to think of another way. With that, Zhang Xiu reached for a cup of tea. However, Shangguan Zhaorong was surprised. Zhang Xiu would never say anything like this to her. He would never explain what he was doing or why he was doing it. Chapter 591. However, what Zhang Xiu didn't expect was that Shangguan Zhaorong would become suspicious. Moreover, after he fell asleep and she helped him organize the books, the letter accidentally fell out of the books. This letter was from the Crown Prince of Western Zhou. It should have recorded the special constitution needed for the goddess to descend. At this moment, Shangguan Zhaorong's heart suddenly moved. She came to the side of the lamp and hesitated for a moment. In the end, she still opened the letter and took out the paper inside. The light was very dim, making her pretty face look slightly yellow. When her bright eyes fell on the paper, 6 dazzling words were written on it. Great Space Fetus Mutation. How could this be? Shangguan Zhaorong's expression suddenly changed. Her eyes flashed with astonishment. She never thought that there would be such a coincidence. She actually met the requirements for the goddess to descend, which could only happen once every 5,000 years. However, the word mutation behind the Great Space Fetus Mutation made her pretty face even paler. At this moment, she was so frightened that her hand trembled and even the letter fell to the ground. A gust of wind blew and extinguished the lamp. The hall was pitch black. Darkness and fear almost engulfed her at this moment. This paper seemed to be a talisman that hastened her death. She sat paralyzed on the ground, her mind blank. At this moment, she was completely confused and didn't know what to do. She only felt very scared. After an unknown amount of time, she stood up from the ground and came to Jiang Xiu's bedchamber. She looked inside and saw Jiang Xiu sleeping on the bed. Her family was pardoned because of Jiang Xiu. She wanted to tell Jiang Xiu and herself that she would repay Jiang Xiu with her life, but now, her life was at stake. Jiang Xiu was very quiet on the bed. Ever since he was seriously injured, his energy was getting better and better. The first thing that deteriorated his divine body wasn't his strength, but his spirit and mentality. When a powerhouse lost his strength, the mental damage was the greatest. Many people couldn't stand up, not because of the recovery of their life force, but more because of their mentality. On the surface, Jiang Xiu didn't seem to be affected. However, after becoming a celestial king, he had lost all of his power. He had regained his composure, and had cultivated to the level of great heavenly deity again with great difficulty. In the end, he had suffered the shattering of his natal ritual tool. After suffering this twice in a row, an ordinary person would have long collapsed. The weather was very cold. The charcoal stove in the palace was still warm, but at this time, it was time to add more charcoal. However, the palace servants did not come. If this happened to any real member of the royal family, this would be a crime punishable by beheading. After all, they did not think much of a so-called Shangxian immortal whose cultivation was crippled. These days, Shangguan Zhao Rong also slowly felt that the people in the palace were becoming colder and colder towards them. So Shangguan Zhao Rong went to add charcoal herself. One night story. The next day, Jiang Xiu woke up to find that it was snowing heavily outside. Snow had already covered the entire imperial city. Palace servants could be seen sweeping the snow everywhere. The sun was still bright and beautiful, shining on the snow and covering the world in white. Young master, Shangguan Zhao Rong prepared breakfast as usual. It's been a long time since I've seen snow. When he raised his head, he saw that there was a huge image of a cloud in the sky. Not only would the image of a goddess appear when it was drizzling, but it would also appear when it was snowing. This made Jiang Xiu feel that perhaps the heaven and earth had left behind some kind of aura of a goddess. As long as something fell from the sky, the image of a goddess would appear. That's right, so beautiful. Shangguan Zhao Rong stood behind Jiang Xiu, looking at his back with her beautiful eyes. No matter which angle she looked at him from, this man was so perfect. Especially that tall and straight figure, as well as that graceful bearing that seemed to be in accordance with the laws of heaven and earth, was especially moving. After coming to the immortal martial continent, he started to struggle for survival. Later on, in order to become stronger and climb up, he had always lived in a state of competition. He had never stopped to look at the snowy scenery. It turned out that the snowy scenery was so beautiful. The only memory he had of the snowy scenery was when he was young on Earth. Jiangnan didn't snow often, but that day, the snow was very heavy. He and Chang Lingran and Chang Lingsu played very crazily, and had their first snowball fight. Thinking of the two pearls of the Chang family, Jiang Xiu's eyes dimmed, and a trace of pain flashed across his face. I plan to set off for the Mi prefecture. Find someone called Second Under Heaven. Shangguan Zhao Rong was very shocked. Young master, you want to find the genius Dr. Second Under Heaven? Jiang Xiu nodded. Shangguan Zhao Rong's eyes stared straight at the back of Jiang Xiu's head, her mind buzzing. Jiang Xiu leaving here, was that the same as giving up on the plan of sacrificing her to let the goddess descend? Why? Shangguan Zhao Rong's heart was in a mess. She felt happy, sad, and most of all touched. But in the end, she couldn't help but want to cry. She lowered her head. Why, you clearly... Second Under Heaven was admittedly the #1 genius doctor in the immortal martial continent. Even if Jiang Xiu's face was big enough, and the genius doctor was willing to help, he might not be able to cure her. Everyone knew that the shattering of a natal artifact was a problem that couldn't be solved. This was because everyone's natal artifact was different. Jiang Xiu turned around and asked, "What, do you think it's inappropriate?" Shangguan Zhao Rong pursed her lips, unable to speak. Jiang Xiu said, "The places we will pass along the way are too far, and it's inconvenient for you to follow me. You can either stay in the Western Zhou Imperial Palace for the time being, or you can return to the Jialan dynasty." Shangguan Zhao Rong's beautiful face changed. "Young master won't bring Zhao Rong?" Jiang Xiu said, "Your appearance is outstanding. If I bring you along, it will cause trouble." A girl who was too beautiful would cause trouble. The problem didn't lie with the girl, but with the men in this world. They would always be attracted to her and then try to take her for themselves. Shangguan Zhao Rong should know this well. But the weather is so cold, and it's snowing heavily. It's very inconvenient to travel. Why don't we stay here for a few more days and then continue our journey when the weather is better? Jiang Xiu's situation wasn't like before. He couldn't just leave with a whoosh. If he really wanted to find second under heaven, he would have to pass through Chuanzhou. Jiang Xiu didn't answer. The snow was coming, and the end of the year wasn't far away. A few days later, the Western Zhou Crown Prince invited Jiang Xiu to attend a banquet. Jiang Xiu lived here, but he hadn't seen the Western Zhou Emperor yet. Moreover, it was said that he was a foreigner. The Western Zhou Crown Prince probably wanted him, a disciple of the Qianqing school, to come out and support them. Jiang Xiu also missed the atmosphere of the new year, so he gladly agreed and attended the banquet with Shangguan Zhao Rong. Western Zhou's state banquet was of a very high level, but Western Zhou's emperor also treated Jiang Xiu very well. Jiang Xiu's seat was third to the emperor's right, while Shangguan Zhao Rong sat behind him. Humph! A man on the side glanced coldly at Jiang Xiu and snorted. He seemed to be very unhappy. This man was wearing armor and was obviously a general. Moreover, he had a sword hanging on his waist at such an occasion. He was probably a special minister of the Western Zhou Kingdom. Jiang Xiu's eyes were slightly gloomy, but he didn't take him seriously. "Immortal Jiang, it's been a long time. I've always wanted to see your elegance, but the Crown Prince said that you prefer peace and quiet, so I didn't want to disturb you. Now that the end of the year is near, I finally have the chance to meet you," the Western Zhou Emperor said. The Emperor of Western Zhou spoke. He had a benevolent look on his face. Although he had the demeanor of an emperor, he looked more like a kind old man. Jiang Xiu said, "The Western Zhou Emperor is too polite." The emperor's politeness seemed to annoy many people below. The Western Zhou Emperor was polite to Jiang Xiu and even addressed himself as "I." Jiang Xiu didn't come out, but when he came out, he found that there were so many people in the Western Zhou Kingdom who were dissatisfied with his arrival. It seemed that the Crown Prince of the Western Zhou Kingdom was also under a lot of pressure. Opposite Jiang Xiu was a foreign prince. Jiang Xiu was not familiar with this area, so he looked at Jiang Xiu with interest and didn't take him seriously. However, a middle-aged man next to the prince looked at Jiang Xiu a few more times. Although Jiang Xiu's natal divine artifact was destroyed and his cultivation was destroyed, his eyesight was still there. He could tell at a glance that this person was a cultivator. He whispered a few words into the prince's ear, and the prince said, "Is this exalted immortal Jiang Xiu? Before I came to the Western Zhou Kingdom, I heard that the Crown Prince of the Western Zhou Kingdom befriended an expert who is a disciple of Qianqing school. I don't know if it's true or not." At the mention of Qianqing school, Jiang Xiu reluctantly said, "I am indeed a disciple of Qianqing school." "Oh, is that so?" The prince looked Jiang Xiu up and down. "But I don't think so." How could a big school like Qianqing school have a disciple like you? Unless the Qianqing school is just fishing for fame, that's all. Jiang Xiu said, "Are you insulting the Qianqing school?" As soon as he said this, the temperature of the audience seemed to drop by a few degrees. Was the Qianqing school something that could be slandered by just anyone? Trouble comes from careless talk. Liang Yingyao was also a newborn calf that was not afraid of tigers. Moreover, he had drunk a little wine, so he spoke without thinking. Insulting the Tianqing school? This prince is insulting it. What can you do to me? You want to put a label on me? You're a liar. Do you think you're good enough to enter the Tianqing school? Even if you complain, you won't be able to find the entrance to the Tianqing school. Shangguan Zhaorong had always believed that Zhang Xiu was Zhang Luoxia, the former head of the Tianqing school. She could not stand being humiliated like this in front of her face. She said angrily, "How dare you? The Tianqing school and my young master are not people that you can insult." Liang Yingyao said, "Oh, little beauty, you have quite a temper. Since when did a servant like you have the right to speak here? Moreover, you're a Tongfeng servant." Perhaps it was limited to Zhang Xiu's group. The status of a Tongfeng maidservant might be higher than that of a servant girl, but a servant girl could go out and marry. However, a Tongfeng maidservant could at most be a concubine. In fact, her status was very low. This person's words could be said to have exposed Shangguan Zhaorong's shortcomings. It could even be said that he was insulting her. On the other hand, Liang Yingyao was so familiar with Shangguan Zhaorong's situation that he must have done some research. Zhang Xiu gestured for Shangguan Zhaorong to calm down. He glanced at the Emperor of Western Zhou. The Emperor of Western Zhou had a look of interest on his face, as if he was waiting to watch a good show. However, he had no intention of mediating the situation. As long as he spoke, the Prince of Liang would not dare to be presumptuous. "Does the Western Zhou Emperor also think that I'm a fake?" The Crown Prince of Western Zhou hung his head in shame. Zhang Xiu was a guest he had invited, but he had failed to protect Zhang Xiu and allowed him to fall into such a predicament. The Western Zhou Emperor waved his hand and said, "You're too serious. I have great respect for you." He did not say that he believed it, but he did not say that he did not believe it. He was very slippery. His meaning was to let the Daliang prince continue to cause trouble. It seemed that the Western Zhou Emperor was not sure whether Zhang Xiu was really a student of the Tianqing school. Or maybe he thought that he had been expelled from the Tianqing school. Or maybe he did not like the rumors outside that his son had been deceived by a swindler and lived in the imperial palace. "I heard that all the students of the Tianqing school are top geniuses. In the immortal martial continent, it was rare for people with spiritual roots to be able to cultivate. Those who were able to cultivate would enter the Tianqing school. Only the top geniuses of the sects would have the opportunity to enter the Tianqing school. It could be said that the Tianqing school was a gathering place for geniuses. Why don't you go down and exchange a few moves? If you really have some skill, then I'll believe it." Everyone knew that Zhang Xiu had been crippled in the battle that day. His life artifact had been destroyed. How could he still fight? Wasn't this clearly trying to make things difficult for him? Shangguan Zhaorong said angrily, "You know that my young master is injured. How can you compete with him?" Liang Yingyao said, "Swindlers have many excuses." Zhang Xiu reached out to stop Shangguan Zhaorong. He said to the Daliang prince, "If you want to compete, how do you want to compete?" Liang Yingyao said, "Come down and exchange a few moves." Zhang Xiu said, "I never exchange moves. Since we're going to fight, then we have to fight to the death." Even if Zhang Xiu was in dire straits, he would not back down even half a step. As soon as he said this, everyone present was moved. The Western Zhou prince felt as if he had seen the demon who had buried the Samsara palace that day. But there were also some who whispered, "Who is he trying to scare? He's just a piece of trash. You think I'm afraid of a piece of trash like you?" This prince was not even a divine immortal. He was only an earth immortal, but outside the sect, he was considered an expert. In the past, he would have been like an ant, but now, "Bring up the swords." Soon, a servant came up with 2 swords from below and gave one to each of them. The swords were inlaid with gems. At first glance, one could tell that they were valuable swords. But in reality, other than being expensive, they were useless. "Young master." Shangguan Zhaorong saw Zhang Xiu pick up the swords and was extremely nervous. She knew Zhang Xiu's body well. He could not use any of his mana. If he did, his body would explode and he would die. Zhang Xiu pretended not to hear and slowly walked to the center of the field. Shangguan Zhaorong was moved. Zhang Luoxia's pride could not be slandered by a mere mortal prince. Would he rather kill this prince? Shangguan Zhaorong knew that if Zhang Xiu really used his mana, it would not be difficult for him to kill the prince in front of her. Young master. Shangguan Zhaorong's eyes overflowed with tears. The Western Zhou Crown Prince's cheeks were also red with anxiety. He wanted to stop Zhang Xiu several times, but he was powerless. He was only a prince, not an emperor. If he did not become the crown prince, there were many other princes who could. Zhang Xiu stared coldly at Liang Yingyao. His eyes were like those of an ancient god looking down on ants. There was not a shred of emotion in them. This gaze completely enraged the prince of Great Liang. "You're courting death." The sword in Liang Yingyao's hand trembled and he leaped into the air. The sword in his hand slashed down from the air, bringing about a dozen sword shadows with it. This prince of Great Liang's sword cultivation was not too shabby, and it caused an uproar in the surroundings. "Be careful." Shangguan Zhaorong had never been so worried before. Her heart was about to jump out of her chest. She could almost see the moment when Zhang Xiu exploded. She was right. Zhang Xiu suddenly unsheathed his sword. The sound of the sword whistling through the air rang throughout the palace. The sword flashed and streaked across the sky. It cut through the air at an incredible angle and pierced through the dozens of sword shadows. Puchi! Liang Yingyao's body fell to the ground with a splash of blood. Whoosh! The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone stood up and looked at the Prince of Great Liang lying on the ground with blood flowing out. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.